Good evening and welcome to the Gin and Tonic show on Friday, the 23rd of February 2018. A warm welcome to all the viewers and to everybody in the chat, and of course a warm welcome to my co-host, Stop Spamming. Good evening, sir. How are you keeping today?
Hi. I'm just waiting for my profile photo to update it.
It's updated on the chat now. So the little picture shows you, and the big picture when you chat shows a different picture. Let's put it that way. So yes, there it is. I'm posting it so that everybody can see it live there. That's a good one.
Ah, there it is. I love it. Okay, I know that I'm a little kid, but this appeals to my sense of humor. Somebody putting the hairstyle of Kim Jong-un on Trump's face. I mean, this I think is so funny when he is so obsessed about his hair.
Yes, good one, that. Well done on that. Good evening, everybody. So Kalam will be joining us shortly around 8:30, give or take. So obviously what we love to do in the beginning, unless you've got anything else you'd love to share, Stops, we'll get into a few crazy comments, which we haven't had for a few weeks due to guests joining immediately. So let's do that for now and see how well that works and present it to everybody. So
I've been told we should keep that to a minimum.
Well, we've got half an hour. I mean, if somebody's got other questions, we can do it. And now I don't remember if I did this one last week.
Okay, Rob, just somebody's asked me, and I think this is a fair point, why we don't interact more with people in the chat. Because last time we were listening to a presentation, which, yes, it was interesting, but then in the chat, people were having a totally different discussion. And we were not aware of this discussion at all. We were not in any way asserting that or reacting to what was being said there, because, of course, we were listening to a presentation. So it's a little bit difficult if we have a 2-hour presentation to react with the chat. But I think we should go and interact more with people.
Yes, agreed. And of course, it's helpful if people are talking about what is being talked about or presented. If people start going off on their own little stories and conversations, that's a bit harder for us to bring in. We could bring it in towards the end of the show, but I think if we've got something on, if we've got Kalam on, or if we've got a guest and they've got something that they are sharing, then maybe it's a case of sort of keeping that or asking for people to share what they think or some questions or whatever the case is, because I think it's
right.
There's a point where we need to let the guests do their thing. But I did see the chat last week, and they were off talking about all kinds of other things. And sometimes that happens. Yeah, but let's do the best we can to interact a bit more with the chat. But there'll be
integrate both. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think this is a fair request.
Yeah. All right, let's do these then. I don't know if I did this one last week, but anyway, this is a lady that apparently her husband tried to contact me at some point. Answer is a spoiled brat, and if he spoke to my husband like he did to Big Bro, he would get smashed. Now I don't know what that means with her husband.
Oh, you did, yeah, because it was me sort of saying people, if it says Sharon, don't always automatically assume it's Sharon, and you clarified in this case it is.
And I might have done this one. So there's a few you haven't deleted. I can't remember on this one. 18-minute answer, sweating under pressure, then appeals to the audience. Should be a spot at his discomfort and repetition of scientific method. Who's the we answer keeps referring to? You face God, Allah alone, and so we can't help you. So I think I did that one last week.
Yeah, but it's still wrong. Yeah.
Oh, this was one where this is a video where hijab was supposedly in some way trying to challenge Harris. He's also tried to challenge Tommy Robinson. He's also tried to challenge Joe Rogan. I just think he's a nobody, and he's trying to do the Ali Dawah thing of trying to get famous. And so this person obviously thought, so basically Sam Harris is a pseudo-intellectual. Yeah, I'm not surprised, honestly, because this was a comment against him, that they were commenting on something. So it was this guy and some other dude, and there's a big TV in the background, and they were talking about Harris and Rogan and so on. So, but here's another one. So obviously this I did think was amusing. Sam Harris has never debated anybody with knowledge and skills. Sam would get the shock of his life, but he always finds a platform with like-minded Islamophobes. So Reza Islam, Reza Aslan, William Lane Craig, just to name two. There's probably could roll off the tongue. Yeah, of course he hasn't. I mean, ignorance is bliss, isn't it? Yeah.
Brother Hijab. Is he talking about Muhammad Hijab, the tall guy?
Yes, of course he's talking about Brother Hijab.
But this guy's totally useless.
I know, but
A 5-year-old child can refute him.
But somehow these guys are hypnotized. Here's another good one. Atheism is just a mental disorder and a cry for attention. You don't believe me. Even an agnostic will tell you. You atheists have no morality and believe in evil or good, or have any answers or solutions to mankind. One atheist can have a different set of philosophy and beliefs from another atheist across the street. Some out there believe rape and pedophilia is okay and just part of the human nature and evolution. I mean, how much nonsense can you talk in 2 or 3 sentences? It's incredible. I would have to try really hard to try and put that much nonsense into a couple of sentences. I mean, it takes a lot of, well, presumably it doesn't take a lot of effort in some people's case. Only an irrational, illogical person will tell you that after the Big Bang or the existence of this planet being close and not far enough, from the sun, where we won't burn to death or freeze to death, and we 12-hour night and day, water cycle, all different forms of life, protecting atmosphere, not strong enough to crush us to death, planet, orbital system, etc. It's just one big fat coincidence, and not from an outside supernatural creator who has given us predictions, given us some predictions, I don't know what sings is meant to mean, predictions in the Qur'an 1400 years ago, and the scientists have barely started figuring it out.
Barely started here. This looks like not alphabet soup, but word soup. Somebody throwing words around, then mixing them up, and then taking them one by one and just putting them out. This is absolutely nonsensical.
Yes.
Wow.
It is fascinating, isn't it? I mean, you can.
Do you think that people actually know about the Jinn and Tonic show? That people have heard about this and are just too scared to come on to bring us things like this? Or do you think that people really do not know about the Jinn and Tonic show to say, okay, this is a platform where you can voice your grievances. You can actually go and speak to those mentally disordered people who are crying for attention. You can ask them yourself. Or do you think people simply do not know?
No, I don't think we're big enough for people to know. It's not like the Atheist Experience or some of the other big shows. People just don't know. And I think a lot of these people can't speak English properly, so they'd be a bit hesitant. And I can understand that. If I was trying to speak in Arabic and I could barely speak it, I wouldn't really go onto the show. So I think that's also part of it. But a lot of these comments don't come from the Jinn and Tonic show channel. It's some of the other channels that are.
Yeah, I know.
So no, I just don't think we're big enough.
There's a lot of from Tan and from other videos. But what I'm thinking is, why is it that so few people actually come on the show? Because there must be a lot of awareness amongst the community where people would point to us and say, listen, if you want to, why don't you talk to them? Instead of just saying, yeah, they're all assholes. They should be saying, well, hang on, why don't you go talk to them? This is what I would do. If you were to come to me and say, look at this group there, they are such idiots. I say, well, they have a chat. Why don't you go talk to them? Ask them. This will be interesting. But I don't think they do this.
No, I think there's a fear that we'll try and make them look foolish, which is not certainly not my intention anyway. That's not the intention. I mean, that's trivially easy. Anybody can make anybody look foolish. That's not the point. But I think that's part of the thing. But I also think, a couple of people have said it anecdotally, so I wouldn't take it as gospel, but a couple of them said, you are a bit scary. So I think it's partly the way, on occasions, how quickly and bluntly you approach them. And so a couple of people have been scared away from that. So, but other than that, I just think, generally speaking, there's a bit of fear around doing it in case they can't answer a question. Which, as we don't have a problem with somebody not answering a question. If you don't know, you don't know. I mean, nobody's a walking encyclopedia. So yeah, who knows? Hopefully,
Kalam is
what?
A walking encyclopedia.
Well, he does some study, but I mean, I'm sure we could. Well, he happened to talk about evolution today, and he said, he wouldn't talk much about evolution because that's not his field. So I mean, you can always find something that somebody's not an expert in.
Because I'm always amazed at how much he does know, and whenever he goes and talks to anybody, and suddenly he comes up with a depth of knowledge where I think, well, where does that come from?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Anyway,
I know that he does a few things behind the scenes, which you need to do anyway. So Moving on. Yep, just another one. Muhammad hijab is a legend. Here we go. The delusion is strong. Like the force is strong. Muhammad hijab would annihilate Sam Harrison. It's like the force is strong on our side. The delusion is strong on the opposing side. I would probably submit.
But Rob, another thing I've heard a lot is that people a lot come to me and say, well, why don't you debate Muhammad hijab? He will annihilate you. I said, well, hang on. If the arguments are about Islam, why can't you come and talk to me? If you have the arguments, why would you wait for somebody else to annihilate me if the arguments are so well known and so compelling? You should be able to do it just as easily as hijab can. Why are you not able to do that?
Well,
have you heard this as well?
Yeah, but I would take a sort of a different approach in the sense that I think these people, kind of look up to hijab and other people. I mean, to some degree, how I admire the knowledge of Phil, because the next comment is about Phil, so I use that example. So if, I've got a little bit of knowledge on that, but nowhere near as much. So if somebody really wanted an education, I'd say, okay, let's have a conversation with Phil. So I can understand why they don't, because they don't know it well enough. They think it's true, but they can't defend it well enough, and they think that hijab can defend it well enough. So that's why I think they will recommend hijab as if he's got the knowledge, say, of a Phil, for example. And I think that's
look at Subur. Subur goes and pretends as though he knows evolution, and he will go and challenge other people.
Yes, for them that's okay. For them that's all right. But when it's the other way around, so of course, I notice, as you quite rightly point out, the inconsistency. It's fine with somebody who's read it a little bit, who will challenge people when they explicitly claim they're not experts. Then the Muslims don't have a problem. Then it's okay for somebody to try and be made look foolish. But when it's the other way around, of course, then they run for the hill. So there's obviously a double standard there. But that's noticeable in many of the discourse with Muslims that I've had that experience with. Again, not every Muslim, but they're very happy when somebody who's non-Muslim gets quote unquote demolished, but when it's the other way around, then they will run for the hill. So clear doubles.
Exactly. Yeah.
So here's another classic comment. You are funny. I think it must be the other way around. Phil clearly stated he know nothing. What expertise? This was in this hour conversation. This is the problem. It's like the brain is not able to assimilate information. It's like a sieve. It just goes through and it only catches a few key words. Hey, we don't know this, or we may not know that, out of an hour's conversation.
But it also shows you that they are really susceptible to bullshit. So if somebody can bullshit his way through a conversation, they think this is knowledge. This is what they do with Sabur. I mean, Sabur has absolutely no knowledge and he's just bullshitting, but he's doing so with your favorite word, with confidence. And therefore they accept and say, wow, he has knowledge, but it's bullshit. So if Phil says, well, hang on, we know what we know what we don't know, and there are some things where we don't even know what we don't know. And this is the way, I think this is very honest. This is a very straightforward approach, and this is how we should view everything around us. But then they mistake that for not knowing, for unknowledge, or for stupidity or something like that. Whereas, I don't know, have you been to the East? If you're in Asia, for example, you ask somebody, where's the station? The guy will tell you, well, you go along this road, you turn left, and there's the station. Well, you go there's no station. And then you go back to him and you ask, oh, why did he tell me that if I go straight and go left, there's the station? Well, he gave you an answer. Yeah, but it's the wrong answer. Yeah, but he gave you an answer. This is better than not giving you an answer. And this is the mentality. Rather give somebody a wrong answer than no answer at all, because it's better. And this is the mentality that you need to live with.
Yes, that's interesting. Yeah. So people will just say something rather than not saying anything at all. And maybe that
it's this keeping face.
Some other people as well. Yeah.
If you give somebody an instruction which might be wrong, but at least you're giving him an instruction, you're giving that person face, because he is now in a superior position, because he knows where you are wrong. And if you ask 5 others, he can get to the truth, and therefore he gets where he wants to go, and he has gained knowledge as opposed to the others, and therefore you have given him more face than he has given you. And this is polite.
Yeah, there's a difference between being polite and honest or rational. But anyway, yeah, maybe we just hold too high a standard for some other people in the world. Well, clearly it seems to be the case. And it's not like we just invented this and you and I, it's our standards. So standards have been, talked about and argued and, written about and gone back and forth for 2,000 plus years. So it didn't just arrive yesterday. And if anybody else has got a better way of doing things, then please present it. But I have never seen it. And I don't think anybody has, to be honest. Anyway.
But the guy who was giving you an answer is trying to help you. And we are just being petty that we are insisting that it needs to be true. It's our fault.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. What can one say to that? Rather say I don't know. But as you say, there's a problem with saying I don't know. That should be praised around the world in every education system. If you do not know something, the first thing you should say is, I do not know, and then be praised for it. So the children and people who are learning understand and accept that is a praiseworthy thing to say when you actually don't know. But yeah, that'll take some time. Cool, moving on. Another threat to Sarah here. All right. Laugh my ass off, you twat. Beat his arse. He in such trouble, the MFKER. And this can only be referring.
How come you don't say swear words? Is this your personal thing?
No, I'm normally quite happy to do it. I just don't know whether it'll have any effect on the channel or not. So I think when we
okay, because I just blurt them out, and I never know if I should or not.
That's fine. It's fine. Oh, there was just a picture of Elon Musk, because again we had flat earthers who went, no, this is not true, etc. So I just took a picture of that while it was floating around the Earth. But it wasn't a crazy comment.
I thought this was egg-shaped Earth.
Don't go there. I've had another one of those comments recently. Another one. I'd knock Tan out, cut off his small dick and put it in his mouth for disrespecting Rasulullah. Again, a very peaceful, one of those peaceful, loving Muslims from the religion of peace. Tan definitely gets under their skin, doesn't he? Like, even Sarah seems to be a bit tame compared to Tan here, with just the number of things that I see anyway recently. Certainly. And, there's a few more for good luck here. This idiot has very deep hatred in his heart, and shouldn't be given all this time to spout opinions as though they were fact. Ridiculous. I know, Alex. It's ridiculous, the Speaker's Corner, where people can say what they want. I mean, maybe we should say the same about all these Muslims coming to Speaker's Corner. Would that be fair? I don't think you've thought this through very well, Alex. But there we go. Oh, another one is, I don't know, I got that twice. Muhammad Hijab is a legend. No, I think we're back to the beginning there. So I think that's all of them. Let me just make sure.
Have I sent you the same as what you had, or what?
No,
or did you take the ones I just sent you?
Where are they? Wait a second. I thought I put them there. My apologies. Just 1 second. Could have sworn I put them in there. Where are yours? I thought I dropped them in here. Damn it, that's weird. Could have sworn that they were.
Okay, let me try taking another look at the chats. My tab switched off. Lack of power.
Okay, I'm just going to delete all.
Because it's quite funny.
Here's another one.
Plug it into a PC.
Ho, ho, ho. How full entered this mess in the end with infinite regression and light speed without having knowledge about the matter was a prime example that he's talking about but doesn't understand. I watched many discussions with him in it, and he always gave me the feeling like he doesn't really understand what he's talking about, that it's just regurgitate what he's been fed by this church and their prophets. Bro, Hashim showed that even atheists can't act smart in front of him, mashallah. This is just... Could you possibly say the opposite of what is true? It is just mind-numbingly entertaining, but incredibly, in some ways, disheartening that somebody could watch that and think that Phil doesn't know what he's talking about just because he talks about things that most people might not be able to follow. Oh, my word. Here's a few more. I thought I got a few more. There is no such thing as free speech. Well, maybe not in wherever you come from, buddy. Can someone stand at Speaker's Corner and insult the Jews, for instance, and mock the Holocaust? Well, in answer to your question,
absolutely.
Yes,
I will do so.
They can do that. Can a person stand at Speaker's Corner and propagate the Nazi ideology? Yes, they can in this country. I guess no. No, you guess wrong. And then how can this vile individual stand there and insult God and the final prophet and not have someone wanting to knock his block off? Because as I've just said,
that's exactly the thing.
Everybody can say what they want. They could talk about the Nazi Holocaust or Nazi ideology or the Jews or whatever the case is, and some people do that. So yes, they can. So don't guess. Rather ask questions and go and search, or I will give you the answer because you seem to think this. Maybe this was a rhetorical question with those 3 question marks there. But nevertheless, I'm telling you, yes, they can do it. So stop guessing. Gotta love these sort of things. Mo Hijab is extremely knowledgeable, MR. However, agreeing, this was half right, half wrong here. So this guy obviously was slightly mistaken with Mo Hijab being extremely knowledgeable. However, agreeing to the below, taking things out of context is something that he does need to cut out. So even this guy agrees he does that. As for Ali, poor lad. So this guy is like semi-confused in the sense that he thinks hijab is extremely knowledgeable, but then he does agree that he takes things out of context, which he should cut out. And obviously, as for Ali, poor lad, clearly he doesn't think much of Ali. So he's kind of half on the ball, which is interesting. I've not found a comment like that where it's kind of 50-50, where, you know, he's kind of obviously made a mistake, but then, you know, he said something that is in fact demonstrable. This Tan is an idiot, thinks he can create fun of religion. He hates Islam and comes to provoke Muslims. Well, he's entitled to do that, and you're entitled not to be provoked. But again, that's a long way away for a lot of people.
Yeah, but hang on. This is exactly what he says. He agrees with this is what he accepts.
Who?
Tan.
Yeah.
And I mean, I do too. I do not like Islam. Okay, I have nothing against Muslims, because a Muslim per se is not somebody who is violent, who is, you know, keep slaves and things like that. Absolutely not. But I do not like the ideology, and I will be quite open about that. And I don't have to. I think it's my right to either go and like or not like an ideology the way that it presents itself to me. Why not? I don't understand why this is such a, you know, despicable thing. I think this is absolutely legitimate. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I just want to give Kalam the details here as well.
If Islam is violence religion, it is a violent religion. And I'm not even agreeing with the religion part. Yes, it's also religion, but I think primarily it's about living together. It's instructions on how to live and sort of submit to a God, and how to get the kafirs, the non-believers, to oppress them, and how to live with them. And that is what Islam is all about. So I think, number one, it's a political ideology. And then if Muslims are violent, yes, there are some Muslims which are violent, but most Muslims, thankfully, are better than their God. Then why this person is still alive and saying bad things about Islam? Because exactly this is why, because most Muslims are better than their God.
And he's in the UK, where he's allowed to do that. If he went to a Muslim country, yes, he'd be Richard. I saw another thing.
In Malaysia, he wouldn't be allowed to do that. I'd never. No. In Malaysia, I had to be very careful. If I was approached by anyone in KL, even in KL, I mean, this is the capital. It's a huge place, very open, very modern, very, I mean, brilliant. I mean, if you look at the monorail and all these things, it's wonderful. I had so much fun there. But the thing is, you need to be careful when you talk about Islam. Yes, they have churches there. Yes, they have all sorts of religions there. Yes, they have all sorts of restaurants. Yes, they have all blah, blah, blah. But you need to be careful. You can't just openly say anything about Islam.
Yeah. Yeah. So the reason he can do it here is because we allow people to say what they think for the most part, although it's slowly being eroded, as we all know, but still allowed to some degree in case somebody gets a hurt feeling. Ali Ahmed, I hope Tan gets caught on road. I guess he means run over or, you know, attacked on the road or something like that. Why you brothers are even talking to Tan? He's mentally sick and fool. Have no knowledge of anything. We should avoid this type of people. Well, it would be useful if you could, you know, write English properly, but it's probably not your first language, so I guess that's understandable. He's taking the piss. My name's Tan. C-Tan. Whatever that is.
Shaitan.
Shaitan. Oh,
Shaitan.
Shaitan, yeah.
Well, the thing is, what I always tell these people, go look at your Quran. Look at 16:125. What does it say? You need to go and propagate Islam, and you need to be very, very extremely polite about it. That's what the Quran tells you. It commands you to do that. So you can't just, why you brothers even talking to Tan? That's why, because they are following the Quran. But most Muslims don't know the Quran, so they don't even know that they're supposed to do that.
Yes, that's true. That's right. Here was answer saying something here. This guy Tan has more courage than all the brainwashed religious nut jobs put together. Not only does he expose their violent nature, but also exposes their misunderstanding of free speech and acceptable behavior per se. These religious guys should be ashamed of themselves, resorting to threatening and hitting people for exposing their stupid, I'm guessing, religions. I don't know which video this wasn't on one of mine.
I didn't expand this. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
What is the name of this? I can tell you immediately. I just need to look crazy comments. This is the hijab video.
Oh, okay. With him talking to hijab, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Was it? No, this is hijab video. This is.
No, this would be Tan with somebody.
Hijab was commenting on something. I can't remember what.
Okay, so this is obviously Tan. Some video of Tan. Free publicity for this guy. Why? And then it's 414. And it has already come down to you in the book that when you hear the verses of Allah, they are denied and ridiculed. So do not sit with them until they enter into another conversation. Indeed, you would then be like them. Indeed, Allah will gather the hypocrites and disbelievers in hell altogether.
Okay, I can find a different section in the Quran which says the opposite, and then what?
Exactly. What was the verse you said?
16:125.
Okay, there you go. So
I hope. I'm just saying this from the top of my head. I don't know the whole Quran.
No, sure.
I'm going to check now. If somebody wants to check, go ahead. I'm too lazy.
Tan has eaten one too many rabbit dogs, and he's definitely.
This is like a zombie, you know? I mean, the whole concept of zombies never has made sense to me, but why would somebody touching you give you something that makes you into a zombie? How would eating a rabid dog make you rabid, you know?
Tan is pure and utter evil. On a serious note, I reckon this guy is possessed. Perhaps the shirk he's committed in his Buddhist temple has led to this. Someone needs to read Ruqya on him. Ruqya on him, and he will run a mile.
Ruqya is this. You have a couple of sentences in the Quran which are being used for if you are possessed, you do what? What does the Catholic Church do?
It's like exorcism.
Exorcism, exactly. So Ruqya is one of the verses that you use for exorcism to drive out the shaitan from out of your soul.
Right. Okay. Right. Yes. I love how all these people speculate on his psychological disposition. I find that fascinating. As if any of them can work out anything. No difference in Tan saying he hates Muslims and Muhammad Tawhid saying he hates Christmas. Difference is Muslims rightly so attack Tan but say nothing towards Muhammad hijab. The hypocrisy is shocking because let's not forget Muhammad hijab hangs around with Tawhid. So this is obviously somebody responding to these guys, and then they were whole.
But this is also wrong. I think this is also wrong because Tan always says he does not hate Muslims. He says Muslims, he doesn't. It's the same as me. I don't care about Muslims. I care about the ideology. I care about what people are making out of it. That's it. And not Muslims as such.
Dan needs to calm down and lay off the coffee, and speak at a medium pace. Yeah, because he does speak fast.
No, this is what makes him. This is actually good. This is his style. That's it.
And then somebody obviously a supporter of Tan. Tan keeps proving his point, and the blind will remain blind. Well done, Tan.
Yeah.
I think this is the last one here. Poor guy, you might get yourself killed. Such a hatred. By the way, he is not Buddhism. He is Christian Chinese. I don't even know his own religion. This is one of the example of dumb motherfucking Chinese from Malaysia. He's not from Malaysia. He is Chinese that lived in Malaysia. He's from China. I'm Malay people. I'm a Muslim, and I respect all religions. Get the fuck out of our country.
I respect all religions. Get the fuck out of our country.
Yes. The hypocrisy is not lost on me there. We don't need you to represent our country. He might end up dead, lol, if he comes back. Malay people, hatred of this motherfucker, Chinese like him, dog bitch ass attitude. Oh, again, what a loving group of Malay people.
I respect all religions.
There we go. Okay, so that's the end of it. Let's just back to another one there. So
let's see if this has now the power.
There we go. So if if you have any comments there. We're just waiting for Kalam. I will just be checking in again with him on Facebook. See if he's with us. There's some interesting conversations there. There were some people who asked us to talk to him about it. Obviously, he's going to share about Kemet and about some of his thoughts on the goings on at Speaker's Corner and the Muslims that he's had in general. So, you know, we'll get some views there. Obviously, he does regular live hangouts, as most people are aware. And he's had a wide variety of guests on. So we'll obviously get a perspective from him on that as well. But some people were asking us to challenge him on Kemet. And with guests, I don't typically challenge them on their own beliefs unless they're willing to have a conversation around it. Typically, I will bring guests on to share a particular point of view. And if they go, hey, yes, I'm happy to talk about that, then I will. So, you know, if Kalam wants to chat about it, then that's fine. If he just wants to present it and then we can talk about Islam, I'm also fine with that as well. So, you know, if somebody comes on as a panelist or just joins us for a general chat and they are, you know, a believer of some kind, then, you know, you would be willing to come on here and have your views challenged. But if you're a guest, I'm quite happy for you to share your views on Islam, because that's typically what we do anyway. So let's see. Hopefully he will be on here shortly. But otherwise, any other news from your side? And is there anything else? I'm trying to bring up the chat here as well. By the way, guys, if you send at the moment, because I can't see the chat, you'll see I'm now typing into the chat. Speakers Live is the account I need to use at the moment. For some reason, I cannot see the chat with a Jinn&Tonic show. It just comes up with a big error on there. So, and there Kalam is. Good evening, my good sir.
I also can't see the chat. I'm sorry. I just tried to switch on my tab and I found out that I did not look after it and the battery's empty.
Oh dear. Okay. Well, I'll keep an eye on it here.
So I can't see the chat either. Hang on, let me see if I can get the other tab.
No worries. In the meantime, good evening, my good Kalam. How are you, my good sir? Can you hear us? Are you coming through? No problem. Kalam is saying 1 minute. I think he's just checking his settings there. Here we go from answer. Big up Kalam Titan. Somebody in the chat here. Somebody in the chat. Ask stops about Savak. Savak. S-A-V-A-K. Savak. Does that ring a bell, stops?
What?
Ask stops about the Savak. S-A-V-A-K. Savak. Does that ring a bell?
Oh, the sun. Yeah. That's.
We could talk about it later. I don't mind. Oh, okay. Cool. The man is ready. Okay. Good evening.
Oh man like Rob, you know. Jeez. Yeah. I'm here. I'm live with you, family. Unfortunately, my screen as well. I can't actually pre the comment section as well. Yep.
Okay, so it's not just me then. So what I had to do, Kalam, is log in with another browser and log in with a different account, like account that you don't use very much. That's the only way I can see the chat for some reason. It's really odd.
Okay. I can actually see it on my phone though. So that's,
okay,
that's
cool.
That's actually a plus.
Cool. So for those who are watching, this is a big warm welcome to Kalam. He's one of our friends from Speaker's Corner. He's going to share with him an alternate view that we haven't heard much about, so we'll be interested in that, and then we'll share many other things. Kalam has been going down for many years to Speaker's Corner. Kalam, please share with the viewers, if there are any that don't know you, which I think is probably very minimal, just share a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your history, and then we can start having a chat. Over to you, buddy.
Okay, all right. Well, a little bit about myself. Yeah, I'm Kalam. I've been going to Speaker's Corner now for about 4 years. Most of you guys will know me either through Titans TV or going down to Speaker's Corner itself. Have I done a cameo before on Rob's channel? I'm not too sure. But yeah, that's where you'll actually know me. I do a lot of debates. I film a lot of the debates over at Speaker's Corner. I film a lot of the debates as well going on over in the American conscious community as well. That's really where I got my foot in the door in terms of YouTube, actually presenting information on YouTube. I've been presenting information on YouTube for about 5 years now. and that's usually with the Kemetic community over in America, and also the Hebraic community as well, and a bit of some Moorish community as well over in the conscious community in America. So that's really where people would know me from in terms of information wise and YouTube and things of that nature itself. Of course, I've got my own channel, which is Titans TV, Talk with the Titans, or you will also know one of our playlists as well, Speakers Corner UK, or Speakers Corner. I'm not even saying UK. I know they're supporting you so much. It's just embedded in my mind, like Speakers Corner UK. Make sure you subscribe now.
And the same for you, by the way. If you're watching this, please go and just look up Titans TV. So Titans, one word, TV, separate word. You'll get Kalam's channel. He's got the lovely icon there, which is just disappeared because he's live at the moment. There's the Titans TV logo. Find that channel, subscribe. You've got well over 35,000 subscribers there. So, you know, please go and add yourself. Kalam does all kinds of different things on different topics. Yeah.
That's right.
That's right. And a few comments here, because you might not be able to see them. Answers going, I can't stop saying nice things about Kalam because he can't see it. Oh, man.
Oh, man. That's my brother answer right there. Salute to you, King.
Cool. Awesome, man. So, yeah, you've been doing this for obviously quite some time. Do you know Stop Spamming, my co-host?
Stop Spamming. I have been informally introduced to him via your channel, and also I think he is there another YouTube channel he presents on? I think it's Speakers Corner. Yeah, examined or something along those, analyzed. I believe it's that. And I'm there.
Exactly.
There it is, analyzed, and I'm there. I'm just tuning in. I love it. I absolutely love it. Basically that brother just goes in. He just breaks down, a lot of the Muslims' arguments and just showing it to you and just making it seem so ridiculous where you may have never actually spotted it before. But my brother's keyed up. He's keyed up and keyed in, and I'm like, woo. Ooh, that's another way of looking at it. Oh, I didn't spot that before. So yeah, no, I've informally been introduced, but hopefully today I'm going to be formally introduced.
You are indeed.
Hear more from
Kalam. Stop speed Kalam. There you go.
Hi there, man.
Yeah,
peace.
Well, actually, I've commented on your videos before. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
No, there you are. Because I don't know what screen to look at the moment. I've commented on your videos before because I've been really, really impressed by what you've done. But we can do that just now when we've finished with the niceties and intros.
Yeah. So Kalam, share with us a bit about Kemet. We hear it about in Speakers Corner. The Muslims obviously don't like it because here's a different ideology that's got a worldview that's got tied together seemingly from quite well in the sense that people present it and so on. So for myself and maybe Stops and those people that haven't heard it, just give us kind of the basic ideas so we can walk away. If somebody says, "Have you heard of Kemet?" I can go yes, and I can give them the basics. Obviously, as you've quite rightly said on occasions, it's quite advanced if you get deeper into it. But just give us the basics if you would. Oh, you've muted yourself, buddy. Just unmute yourself there.
All right, perfect.
There you go.
So, when we're talking about Kemet itself, most people may not be familiar with the word itself and the term it actually, the whole meaning of it itself. So Kemet itself literally is the empire and the state of ancient Egypt. Okay, ancient Egypt. That's the name of ancient Egypt. We're going back well over 3,000, 4,000 years. That was the name of ancient Egypt, and literally just means blackness or darkness. And that empire of ancient Egypt literally spanned all the way from, let's say, into Sudan, Ethiopia, all the way South Sudan, Ethiopia, all the way up north into Egypt proper today, all the way over into Libya to the west, in Chad into the west as well, all the way over into the Arabian Peninsula as well. So that was the whole landmass and the empire of Kemet itself. And when we're talking about Kemet today, really and truly, we're not really talking about the landmass. When people say, "Oh, Kemet," no, we're actually talking about the philosophy that those people in the landmass of Kemet actually held itself. Now, the philosophy that they held itself wasn't actually called Kemet or Kemetic or anything like that, but it just seems as though Kemet has become the go-to word or the buzzword, so to speak, that more people are familiar about. If we say Kemet, 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 people kind of tend to know what you're talking about, but the actual philosophy itself is called Ma'at. And Ma'at simply means is a concept that means like truth, justice, abundance, reciprocity, balancement, equality, harmony, life, and so much other you know, concepts tied together. It's really a polysemic word itself. So just loads of concepts just tied together into a oneness, so to speak. And in that concept, or that Kemetic philosophy, or that philosophy of Ma'at, it literally teaches you to know things. That's the most fundamental principle in the whole of Ma'at. There is nothing prior to knowledge. You know, everything just kind of holds on knowledge itself. So usually when we speak, and we've given everybody like a catechism or a creed itself. I'm going to use the word creed ever so, you know, lightly itself. So we have the first principle, which is gnosis, i.e. knowledge, science, knowledge, knowing. We usually teach three things, yeah? Knowing thyself, knowing the universe, and you'll know the mystery of the deity itself, or the divine principle. So that's kind of like the root of Ma'at itself, is simply knowledge, knowing things, and you don't want to, and what you want to know is yourself. That's key principle. So you want to go through that process of introspection and getting to know who you are in this universe itself. Then you want to know what's around you, like, ooh, what's this? Ooh, that's a flower. Ooh, that's a bird. Ooh, that's a bee. Ooh, there's water. Ooh, what do I do with this? So you want to know your surroundings. How can you, in your surroundings, you know, benefit? What can you take from your surroundings to benefit yourself itself? Then afterwards, you want to think much more higher. You want to go into the realms of philosophy itself, like actual speculation, or how can I put it, metaphysics, so to speak. And then you get to know divine principles. Most people say, you know, God. We don't really have a concept of God. We just realize principles within side of nature that we as human beings choose to divinize. Okay, we don't think that there is a God that created all of this. No, we just simply see that there is elements within side of nature that possess a principle that we want to actually draw nearer to, or draw closer to, or emulate itself. So that's kind of the basics of the Kemetic philosophy, so to speak.
Cool. So you said it's sort of 3,000 to 4,000 years old. So by that standard, it predates, you know, certainly the monotheistic and the Abrahamic religions then. And to what degree do you think that they have borrowed from that philosophy, that worldview, ideology, etc.?
Personally, I think all of them draw from Kemetic philosophy. Yeah, all of them draws from Kemetic philosophy. We actually take the argument that Moses was a real character in history. You know, supposedly he was born, raised, grew up in Egypt for over 40 years of his life. And, you know, anybody that studies the Kemetic civilization as well, you know what type of, you know, education that you will be receiving. We can just look at, you know, the whole story of Genesis onwards. There's literally Jewish biblical, I don't even know what the word is itself, biblical literature analyzers, whatever the case is. Yeah, they've literally looked into it and they said, oh, look, it draws from Kemet here, or draws from ancient Egypt here. It takes this principle of, you know, Genesis 1 comes from Egypt here. It gives you the whole breakdown of where it comes from. Even Christian scholars as well, you know, literally say, look, you know, the whole of Genesis story is coming from ancient Egypt, Kemet itself. So I would say it heavily borrows from ancient Egypt, but at the same time, it tries to distance itself from ancient Egypt in the same breath. Yes,
I think that's what I notice with people who are, you know, challenge you guys and so on. They want to show that it's significantly different. Now, you did say something interesting, that you don't have a supernatural God of some kind. So when you sort of get challenged by these people in Speaker's Corner and elsewhere, and they would say to you, well, you know, what's the source of your knowledge or your morals? What is your normal response to that?
The source of our knowledge and morals would be our intellect and our surroundings.
It's a good answer from my point of view.
Naturalist? So you're naturalist?
You know what? I'm going to ask you to describe a naturalist so I can actually confirm or deny it.
Okay, my definition of a naturalist is somebody who says that we only have one explanation for everything around us, and that is nature.
Yeah, I would say so then.
I suppose it also depends what you mean by nature. For me, nature is everything inside this universe, if I can use that term. So whether it's a spirit, whether it's a ghost that we haven't yet, got a scientific answer for, that's just an extraordinary claim. And if and when we get scientific knowledge on that, then we would go, okay, here's an explanation for something that is quite a rare event, but it's no longer unexplained, So, and I think that's very different from the Abrahamic religions, which is there's a supernatural entity, which is oftentimes referred to as some kind of a mind with intelligence and a will and all that sort of stuff, that traditionally kind of lives, for want of a better word, outside of the universe and kind of looks in. So he's sort of peeping in there and keeping an eye. And from what I can tell, you don't have anything like that.
Nothing like that at all.
Yeah, so it's definitely more of a...
Guys, can I just interrupt for half a second?
Go, yeah.
Somebody's just given us a workaround with the Google problem with the chat. That is facts and logic. Sign out of the browser, go back to the video, sign back in on a separate tab, then go back to the first tab, and this will let you now see the chat and comment. So this is a workaround. So it's all a matter of going from one browser tab to the next and signing in and out. So what you need to do is open up a separate browser tab, signing out, signing back in, go back to the first one. It will then let you see this, and you can see the comments, see the chat, and participate. Sorry, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Stops, for that, because I think Kalam was having some problems.
No, it wasn't me. No, this wasn't me. This is a big thing.
Yeah, I saw it online there by Facts and Logic. So he's added that.
Facts and Logic, exactly.
Yeah. Brilliant. Awesome. So you're not having this problem, are you, Kalam, on your channel? You can see the chat and that's working fine. Hang on, you've muted yourself again. Yeah. That's the other thing with your channel. It's so well behaved as well. Each person speaks, you mute each person. Some of the hangouts, I mean, it just becomes like everybody's talking, everybody, it's just like a complete mess.
Crazy.
I mute myself too much.
So yes. I'm actually looking at the comment section and I'm seeing Aviasco and it's like, stop advertising water, Kalam. No, I'm trying to get this sponsorship. I'm trying to get Nestle Pure Life to actually sponsor me. So I'm going to keep on going.
Go first. Drink your water. Oh man, that's good.
Nestle Pure Life Still Spring Water, the only water I didn't drink.
I know what your other role should be, a radio talk show host. I tell you. Brilliant, man. Okay, so how does it? Here's a question for you. How does we just use the word as you said, just because people are familiar with it? How does Kemet, for want of a better word, differ from a non-belief? Because when you were chatting earlier on this afternoon in your live stream, you said that you have atheistic tendencies. So how would you differentiate the two? If somebody asks you, okay, so you're a Kemet, I'm an atheist, Kalam, how do you differ? I understand you have some atheistic tendencies, but there's obviously something or more than something that you believe that perhaps an atheist wouldn't believe or doesn't believe.
Okay, so in terms of atheism, as far as I know, I don't think atheism have a divinity of some sort, where I would be lying to say that Kemet doesn't have divinity. I think I explained it earlier on that we have something called Netcher or Netcheru, and that literally translates into a divine principle. So, for example, we have a principle of truth, okay, and we divinize it. We call truth our God, so to speak. I don't know how we would worship it. Like, I don't know how, people might think, oh, so how do you worship truth? In a sense, we want to, we idolize truth as a principle that we want to hold in our lives as something that we value so highly that it'll be almost as a sin, so to speak, to lie. We want to exemplify the truth no matter what. Everything that we work towards is the truth. Everything that we do is the truth. We are truth itself. So in that sense, we have something that we divinize, and it's not a God, so to speak, as actual, being with personality or does this and does that. It's just simply principles that we choose to divinize, we choose to hold sacred, and we choose to want to emulate and live up to.
Yes.
But how do you become a Kemet, and who is a Kemet? In how do you get?
You've muted yourself a bit quickly there again. Stop. Try and just repeat the last bit.
I cannot get used to this. The question that would interest me is, if you say Kemet is this Kemet, who is this group? Who is part of the group, and how do you get to be one of the groups so that you go and adhere to these tenets?
Okay, excellent. So most of the people who tend to claim being Kemet itself are people who are usually coming from an African, Afro-American, or people over here in Europe and so forth, who, how can I put it, who are more than fed up with the religions that they have been indoctrinated into. So, you know, usually people who are Kemets are usually coming from an Islamic background, a Christian background, or a Judaic background. And that's usually down to colonization or slavery or whatever else there is that's actually happened to African or Black people in the past, you know, hundreds of years, where they actually lost their culture, their identity, their own spiritual system or philosophical system. So usually these people tend to go on a journey to be like, okay, let me negate all of that. Let me throw that all away for one hot minute. And who was I before? Usually we go through a process of self-introspection, like, if I wasn't a Christian before the colonizing forces came over to Africa, or these forces gave it to me, what was my people practicing prior? That's usually how it kind of starts. And then people look into African religions or African philosophy itself and say, my people were Yoruba. My people were Ashanti. My people were part of the Congo, and so forth. And they're like, okay, so let's find out, what were my people into? And then they may go and visit these countries. They may go and speak to somebody who, you know, is part of that culture and still holds on to their traditional indigenous way of life. And then they're like, okay, I want to learn more. I want to learn more about this. Okay. Because I want to self-identify. I want to have an identity. I want to have something that I can call my own. And that's usually the starting point. And then usually, you know, they either adopt the Yoruba way of doing things, or they adopt the, you know, the Igbo way of doing things, or the Congo way of doing things, and so forth. But at the same time, we tend to go back into the root of, okay, this is our individual identity. We understand that. But just as the Europeans have their classics, such as Greek philosophy, what is the traditional African classical philosophy itself? And then that usually takes you back to ancient Egypt. Okay, we usually go back to ancient Egypt as that itself, as the classical philosophy itself. So we usually go in that direction to learn more about that classical ancient African philosophy. You know, was the height or the pinnacle. Most people see that as the height or the pinnacle. I'm not going to say that it is the height or the pinnacle. I would say that it's more of the apparent height and pinnacle. And then you usually veer off into that itself and learn more about the Kemetic philosophy. And it kind of explains more of the because more research and study has gone into it, rather than, let's say, I don't know, let's say the Igbo tradition. Most people don't know anything about the Igbo tradition because there's not an intense study in the Igbo tradition. But if you go to Kemet or ancient Egyptian philosophy, you could find much more information. So that's usually how people get into the root of learning about Kemetic philosophy itself. How many people are involved in Kemetic philosophy? That's a good question. I couldn't possibly tell you how much people are involved. If I was to guess, I would say maybe about 250,000 people worldwide are classified as.
So I cannot be a Kemetic then. I cannot be a Kemet.
I say anybody could be a Kemetic. Anybody could learn Kemetic philosophy. Anybody.
I suppose there's a difference though between learning Kemetic philosophy and potentially feeling like or being referred to as a Kemetic, to use that term. So is it exactly. Almost?
My next question: can you convert? Can you become? And this is my next question. Where there's
no, I don't think you can convert. I don't know how you would convert to Kemetic philosophy. It's kind of like saying, I am learning Confucianism, or Confucianism. Do I now convert to Confucianism? Or I'm reading, what's his name? What's my brother's name? Oh, Aurelius. What's his name? Meditation. Do Do you know that book? The Roman guy, what's his name? Marcus Aurelius. That's it. Marcus Aurelius, Meditation. That's kind of like Roman philosophy. Like nobody converts to Roman philosophy or Greek philosophy or Oriental philosophy or anything like that. You just simply learn it and take on those principles in your life.
Yeah, I suppose maybe that's where the, well, possibly a little bit of confusion out there, maybe even a little bit of my own, because sometimes it sounds like, and again, it's just maybe my mistake. Clearly, it sounds like there's a bit of an ideology, but it's more like it's not an ideology in the strict sense that people think of an ideology like Judaism, in Hinduism, Islam or Christianity. It's more a way of life, and you follow some principles as opposed to. I mean, does it? Well, let me ask you the question this way around: to what degree does Kemet influence your entire life? How comprehensive is it, perhaps compared to, let's say, Islam or Christianity?
So the Kemetic philosophy, I would say, in terms of its morals, I think that it's my guiding principles from an ethical standpoint. From an ethical standpoint, it guides my whole life, because things that I would choose to do, because it's so embedded inside of me, I'm like, oh, I can't even, like, I hear you. Like, everybody will be advising me to do one thing, and I'm like, I hear you. I want to, but something inside of me just doesn't allow me. So it's literally my key decision-making factor itself. But in terms of practices, like, I don't know, like there's nothing that I can't do that doesn't align with my own ethical stance itself. So maybe, I don't know, you may have to just rephrase that question.
Okay, is there any sort of rituals maybe that you do that one can, point back to Kemet and say, hey, I'm doing this, perhaps I'm kneeling or I'm meditating or I'm saying some chants or I'm doing something that aligns with, this beliefs that only I, as a quote, Kemet would do. So is there any sort of rituals along that line?
Okay, so there is other things. So for example, we have Kemetic philosophy, and that is universal. Anybody can actually take that on and adopt it and so forth. Then there's something else, which is more of a mystical / spiritual system. Okay, and there is usually mystical or spiritual schools attached that claim a legacy or lineage going all the way back to ancient Egypt. How true that is, please don't ask me. I won't be able to confirm it. And there is practices in there. There is meditations. There is prayer rituals. There is chants. There is, all different types of things that's involved, libations and so forth. All of those things are actually involved. But that's if somebody chooses to go down that path. Most people who are part of the Kemetic community, they simply deal with the philosophy or the history and the science of it, and tend not to go down the spiritual path itself.
Okay, cool. I mean, that sounds good. Just a thought for everybody who's viewing. If you're in the chat and you'd like to ask a question, then please do ask that. Myself and Stops are keeping an eye, and I think Kalam might be on a side eye there as well. So if you've got any questions for Kalam, then please do put them. Here's a few questions as well. Stops, by the way, jump in at any point. Just jump in with any thoughts you have at any point here as well. I've got a few that came from the chat from your live stream a little earlier, sort of advertising and talking about, the show today. And so somebody asked you, now again, if this is a question not related to Kemet, then perhaps we can keep it on. But somebody asked, I would like you to discuss the superiority of the veil of ignorance. Now, I don't know whether that was referring to Kemet or whether that's something that we can perhaps hold until a little bit later on. Does that ring any bells to you?
Maybe later on.
Okay, good. Cool. I want you to talk about no, that's another one for later on. That's all fine. So you did kind of answer this, but let's maybe do it on the show again. I don't know whether this is tongue-in-cheek or an honest one, but somebody says, show me your Kemetic Big Bang theory about energy.
Yeah, so
thank you.
I should actually pull that up. Maybe a little bit later on, I'll actually pull it up. But just to speak lightly, is this that every single major school or temple system in ancient Egypt. So, for example, we had 4 major schools or temple systems in ancient Egypt. Right at the top is the Heliopolis temple system. Then we got further down, which is the Memphis temple system. A little bit further down again is Hermopolis, and then all the way down is the Thebes temple system itself, and all of those systems dealt with asking questions to figure out who they are, where they are, what the universe is, how the universe came into existence, and so forth and so forth. And most of them came up with a very in-depth mythology of how this came about, and most of them are speaking of what would be reminiscent of today, of the Big Bang model itself. Literally, coming from non-movement, I don't want to say non-existence, but non-movement. There was this sudden, rush of, or sudden, coming about, or coming into existence, so to speak, and then a differentiation or an explosion that actually caused and caused all of this that we see today. So we all have that principle, or that cosmological understanding in the four major school systems in Kemet itself. So that is something, and I said I would bring it up later on, and I'll find the book that actually explains it all as well.
Okay, so those principles, is those laid down in some way that's kind of formally laid down, or is that more just something that's evolved over time? Whereas I'm doing my best to compare, and that's where I want you to differentiate as well. Obviously with other religions, it's all built into their books. So their books teach them most things about life, and included in there are supposedly some facts about science and so forth. So what you've just talked about there is that part of Kemet itself, or is it more that kind of like a science branch of Kemet, which is not necessarily part of the main Kemet philosophy per se?
No, it's part of the main Kemetic philosophy to wonder about the universe and how it came about, and what is the prime cause of the whole universe itself. So that is like one of the fundamental elements in Kemetic philosophy, to ask these questions. And it's not stagnant, or it wasn't stagnant back then. It was constantly evolving to say, okay, we've got new information, so now we're going to change the story this way, we're going to adapt it that way, and so forth. So it's constantly evolving, not just there is this one story of this is what happened and there is nothing else. The more information that we came across, the more that we tweaked what we initially thought in the first place.
Okay, so it is this.
How do you acknowledge the stories that were around at the time, coming from the Akkadians, from the Sumerians?
How do we acknowledge? Sorry,
still cutting off a bit there. Stop. Just keep your mic on unless there's a lot of noise.
I need to get you. I don't know what. Okay. The question is, you are aware of the different stories that were running around the region. I don't know how else to put it. That the flood myth and all these things. So how do you acknowledge these stories that were in the region at the time, and how do you see that they influence the let's say the stories that you have heard, which influence then in turn
okay, so the question is, did these, I'm assuming the question is this, did these stories from the other civilization cultures affect the Kemetic stories themselves? I would say later on, it could be possible that they could have affected it. But I have no information to suggest that they did affect it. Most of these stories...
Are you saying that it's first? Are you saying that Kemet came first and then the Sumerians?
No, I'm not going to make that claim. The stories, the Sumerian stories, as far as I know, okay, so I'm going to say as far as I know, somebody could correct me if I'm wrong. As far as I know, the Kemetic stories of the cosmological stories were not influenced by the Sumerians directly. I believe that they constructed their own cosmological understandings. But later on, do I see any influence coming in? I would say roughly around the 5th century BC. Do we see any influence from Babylonian or Eastern influences coming over to explain cosmology in Kemet itself?
Exactly, yeah.
So let me ask you a slightly provocative question then, Kalam. Is there anything going back all that way that suggests, for example, that those folks thought the earth was round as opposed to flat? Because obviously traditionally, when I look back in history as far as we can tell, and maybe you've got a different view, Eratosthenes, who you may actually claim to be Kemet or a follower of Kemet, was the person who, you know, realized, and through observations and testing, that the Earth was in fact not a flat surface. So, and that was about 200 BC, give or take, in Egypt, where he measured it between Cyan and Alexandria, which is about 800 miles. He used these poles in the, you know, and at midday at Syene, there was no shadow cast, and at that midday in Alexandria had somebody there, and there was a shadow, and he was able to calculate the circumference of the Earth to within about 10%, which was remarkable for somebody of 200 BC. So does he fit in with Kemet, or B, did Kemet have that idea? And if so, was there somebody that you can point to that in fact thought or believed or tested that the Earth was round? Because it's one thing for somebody to believe something, but obviously it's good if people can actually ascertain through testing that in fact it is the case.
Yes. In terms of actually testing, I won't speak on that itself. There are loads of papyruses, astrological or astronomical papyruses in the literature of Kemet itself. Remarkable papyruses actually on astronomy itself. But so I can't talk to you on testing it itself. I'll have to read into those, you know, that category of literature itself. But in terms of talking about whether the Earth was spherical or flat, no, the ancient Egyptians or the Kemetics always had the conceptualization that the Earth was spherical itself. When you go there and you actually look at most of the mythos itself, and you talk about Geb, most people talk about this. Look, you know, Geb is flat, and it would show you that there is like a principle called Nut, which is the heaven or the skies, and it's arched over in like a semicircle arch. And you know that you would say, okay, but that's semicircular, and yes, but underneath the semicircle itself there is a principle that we called the Duat, which is a reflection of Nut underneath. So it will be like this is that, and then underneath.
Yeah, but that's the firmament, right? And I know this picture. I know exactly what you're talking about. But isn't that also the firmament?
The firmament. Please explain to me. I know, you know, I know most.
This arch that you are describing.
Yeah.
That, because I know exactly the picture that you're talking about, because I've used it so many times in my videos. This arch that you see, which has, and now I can't remember what is above the arch. There's something above the arch, and both on the left and right corners. But underneath you have the flat Earth, and on top you have this arch, which is the firmament, which is being described in Genesis and the Qur'an.
Okay. So I'll have to go in quickly because I know most biblical people talk about the firmament, and I'm like, okay, all right, let me just quickly go and check out what the firmament means. The heavens or sky, right? The heavens or sky.
It's a canopy. It's like on top you have a disc, like a record, and then on top of that it's like you know these old cheese containers or cake containers. If you have this from Tupperware, you must be aware of this too. You have this cake thing, which is like a disc, and then on top of that you have a dome, which keeps everything fresh. Oh, there you have it. Exactly. This is the picture that I'm talking about. Exactly. It's the second one, which is, and the one on the left is actually what I was talking about, where you have the flat at the bottom, then you have the firmament on top, and then on the left and the right, you have the explanations. That's exactly the picture that I had in mind.
Yes. So right here, this is the sky basically itself with all of the stars and so forth. And then we have
that's what you call the firmament, the dome on top.
The dome on top. So yeah, this principle over here we would call Nut itself. And if you know it as the firmament, it's the firmament, the skies itself. And then underneath the skies, or underneath the Earth here, we have another principle, which is called the Duat, which is literally another semicircle that goes underneath. So we always visualized or visioned the Earth as being spherical. You can also go into the Amduat. Let me just quickly type in the Amduat. Hopefully it will come up. The Amduat right here. As you can see, the other end of this, there will be another semicircular bow going on over here at the other side. It's quite a long scene itself, but there's another semicircular, and it shows you the path of where the sun actually travels. So from here it travels all the way around. So we've always had the conceptualization that the Earth or the planet that which we are in is actually global, or it's spherical. We never actually had the flat Earth concept, to my knowledge.
Okay, cool. We can always come
Okay.
back to that again. Yeah, I've got some other questions that certainly ask.
And the role of the sun?
The role of the sun?
Sorry, just unmute yourself. Try again, stops.
The role of the sun. Am I cutting out?
What are you asking about the role of the sun, though? Are you asking what is the role of the sun, or?
Yes.
Okay. The role of the sun would literally be to give life, give light, give energy. If you're talking about just the physical sun itself, we have
no. The spiritual aspect of the sun, because at some stage, sun, the Ra, was the life giver itself.
Yes. So we break it up into like three. When we're talking about Ra or this Ra, that principle, the divine principle itself, is broken up into three, elements. So we can have Ra, which is the mythological, the myth of Ra itself. Then we have Ra, the sun itself, and then we also have Ra, which is our consciousness itself. All three are intermixed and related in the concept of Ra. So when we're talking about Ra, we're talking about the creator, the opener, the one that gives life, the one that gives consciousness, the one that gives knowledge, the one that gives information, and so forth. It's all interrelated, because without the sun, there will be no light, there will be no life, there will be no consciousness. Same as with our minds or our consciousness, there will be no light, there'll be no form of knowledge, and so forth. So these three concepts, or these three, from a physical who we are, consciousness, then the sun, and then the mythological divine principle, is all the same thing to us. It's all the same thing to us, but just in a different manifestation.
Cool. I've got quite a few questions here that I want to ask you, but another one, share with us, because some people, I think, will try to challenge you and go, hey, you've got this mythology according to them, and you guys are coming to tell everybody about it. So can you talk a little bit about the view of sharing Kemet with other people? If we compare it directly with Islam, because the show often critiques Islam, they have a, Dawah, as you know, and they are virtually mandated to go out there and share a message and tell everybody that's true and everything else is false. Now, what is there a principle in Kemet where you share this, or is it a case of, you keep it among the followers, and if people inquire, then you would tell them, or is there some principle where you go out and share this in some way with the greater world, so to speak?
Okay. Generally speaking, most of us don't go out, proselytizing or trying to, share anything with anybody in that sense of, giving dawah or evangelizing. I don't think any of us actually really do that. I don't think so. No, none of us really do that itself. But at the same time, if you do go and read certain books such as the Kemetic, that is actually taught to us to actually speak to people who we say are in a state of death, are in a state of sleep, are in a state of illness. And usually we utilize the the term, they need medicine. Hey, yo, medicine, man. Where's my medicine, man? I miss guys right about now. Yeah. So usually we talk about, giving people medicine because they're in a form of sickness, like a mental sickness, or in a mental sleep, or in a mental state of death. And we are supposed to go to people and actually speak with them and kind of wake them up and teach them, like, you know what? Like, you're sleeping right now, that Matrix moment, like, you're actually sleeping right now. No, I'm not. No, you're actually sleeping. You don't know how beautiful it is to actually be awake. Okay. It's like the Plato and the cave analogy. And I think most of us fully understand that, from reading, some of us may not have actually read Plato's cave analogy, but some of us might think to ourselves, we are awake right now, but if we go over there into that cave and start to speak to people about the outside world, they may just turn on us and actually want to kill us. So you know what? Leave them in their ignorance. I think most people are kind of in that mode right now, and only speak to people who are willing to actually learn and willing to awaken themselves as such. But me personally, I actually do take it upon myself to actually try or attempt to wake people up. I don't try to wake people up in the sense that I'm going to tell them, Kemet is the way, this is what you need to believe in. No, I don't do that. I just simply tell people, all I want you to do is to think. That's all. Just think. I don't care less. You could believe in whatever you want to believe, but if you start actually thinking and really thinking and being critical, you wouldn't be believing in anything, to be honest with you. You'll start a process of actually knowing and being critical and actually searching for the truth and wanting to have knowledge and wanting to better yourself. So I don't actually tell anybody what to think. I just tell people to think, full stop.
Yes, that's kind of one of my creeds, critical thinking. I just want everybody to do that. Per se, I'm not out to deconvert, although I think that's a consequence of critical thinking anyway of some of the religions, but that's the whole thing. If you can go away and critically think, I think that'll do you the world of good. And I often chat to people in various hangouts, and that's my goal anyway. So it's interesting to hear you say the same thing. I'll ask you a few questions from the chat here. Again, I don't know whether you've answered these in past hangouts and so on, or whether these are serious. So you can just laugh or tell me. Is Kalam one of those "we was kings" people? We was kings, K-I-K-A-N-G-Z. We was kings. I don't know what that refers to. So
Kangs and she. I don't really know what that means itself. But so I would say no. I don't think so.
Okay, no, I just put the question out there. I don't know how serious it is. Do you think the concept of heaven and hell originally came from the Egyptian Book of the Dead?
Okay, the concept of heaven and hell actually predate the Egyptian Book of the Dead. You can go back into the coffin text, go back into, what else can you go back into? You can go back into the pyramid text, and it does have the concept of heaven itself. So it doesn't, okay, so the concept of heaven and hell goes prior to the Book of the Dead, but most people would be familiarized. For example, the Greeks first adopted, would it be the Greeks or the Hebrews? Good question. No, I think it's the Greeks. I think the Greeks first adopted that principle of heaven and hell and Hades and the underworld, and you go down in this place and you see Cerberus, and then you pass over into there is this river, and you go meet Chiron, and you give him the 2 pieces of gold, and you cross over. Like a lot of these, I know, the fields of reeds, or the fields of peace and so forth, and the gardens where there's rivers flowing, and all these concepts here. Definitely is inside of the Book of the Dead, and I believe biblical, what's the word now? I've lost my train of thought with that word. Biblical something. Biblical scholars. Is it biblical scholars? I believe it's biblical scholars. They themselves have traced back the concepts to ancient Egypt itself. Greece traces back its concept of heaven and hell to ancient Egypt itself. So yeah, those concepts are definitely inside of the Book of the Dead. Did they directly get it from the Book of the Dead or any other books? I'm not too sure, but those concepts definitely are in the Book of the Dead. Cool.
Good to know. Now I'm going to ask you a question. I'll put it in the chat because it's quite a long one, and maybe you can see it as well. Does Kay think that it is meaningful when people claim titles such as doctor, PhD, just by itself, labeling themselves as such? Does he think it is dishonest or otherwise school of life? Does that make sense to you?
Okay.
Have a look in the chat. I'll put it in our private chat anyway there, so in case.
Sweet. All right. Does Kay think it's meaningful when people claim titles such as doctor or PhD? Just by self-labeling themselves as such, does he think it's dishonest or otherwise school of life? Okay. Okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I don't think there's anything wrong with somebody labeling themselves as a doctor. But if they're doing it to confuse, or they're doing it to misguide, or they're doing it fraudulently, as to say, claiming that they are a doctor of such and such, or they have a PhD of such and such, then I do think it is, nah, I'm not down for that. I do think it's fraudulent. But if they're just saying it as if they belong to a specific school of thought, for example, my Nuwapians out there, they may say, doctor this, I'm a doctor of this and a doctor of that. But inside of their own sect, they understand, or they have their own nomenclature, what that understands what they mean when they say, I am a doctor of this, or I'm a master of this, then yes, you can do that in your own school of thought. But to say on the outside world and what the outside world perceive what a doctor is, and you might be now fooling somebody into thinking that you're a doctor, into receiving monetary payments, then I have a problem with that.
Yeah, so I guess to summarize that, that would be a case of somebody needs to be qualified in some way in order to claim that. And maybe that's a question to ask you as well. Is there some, so when somebody is like yourself that has studied some of this stuff, is there, obviously there's people that have studied perhaps a lot more than you have, do they sort of claim some kind of doctorate, or do they claim some kind of scholarly label to indicate to people that they've done, you know, some years of study as other people do in many other facets of life?
In Kemet, or
yes, or in the philosophy of Kemet itself, or the history, or whatever the case may be.
Not that I'm aware of. I'll put it that way. Not that I'm aware of. Nah, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
Cool. A couple of questions. Then we'll get to one or two interesting ones, I think. So was Bilal a Kemet apostate?
Was Bilal a Kemet apostate? Okay, for those people who don't know what you know who Bilal is an Habashi individual during the time of the 7th century of the Prophet Muhammad in Arabia. Was he a Kemet apostate? It depends on how you're utilizing the term Kemet itself. But I will call him based upon his tribe, and I'll call him a Habashi individual. I believe he was half Habashi on his mother's side and half Arab on his father's side. So no, I wouldn't call him a Kemetic apostate. I simply call him somebody who followed Muhammad and had a sentiment of monotheism in his soul from prior. So that's what I would call him. Okay,
good answer. What does Kalam think about evolution?
I think that we are constantly evolving every day, and for those of us who are not constantly evolving every day, we are constantly devolving every day. And the moment you stop evolving or devolving, you are dead.
Yes, I think. Well, it's important.
What's the origin of humans then? To put you on the
spot. What is the origins of humans? Great question. Great question. The origins of humans, I don't know. But if you want me to get all philosophical on you, the origins of humans is humans themselves.
Although I guess you'd have to say
you don't go with evolution, you don't go with biology, then that's for sure.
No, I'm simply saying that I do not know. I
think that's a fair answer. I think, once you say I don't know, I'm good with that. Because once you start to speculate, then you kind of move away from the don't know, and then people want to pin you on something. So I think the honest answer is, I don't know. And if that's, that's another thing. I just for a moment to harp on for a short moment. There's not enough people saying I don't know. We just don't hear it in these sort of discussions. We certainly don't hear it very often down in Speaker's Corner. And I think you and Stops and anybody else are quite happy with it. And I think we need to remember and applaud people who say, I don't know. If you don't know, don't make stuff up. We are not experts on every area of life. And so when you don't know, we don't know. And that is a great answer. It's just not seen that way so often in these sort of discussions. So totally fine. If somebody asks me something and I don't know, I'm going to say that. If I'm like, for the universe, I'm agnostic on the, what's the origin of the universe. There's many competing things. Either I believe that it had a beginning or it didn't have a beginning, or I withhold my belief. And I think at the moment there's a lot of conflicting information out there, and not conflicting as in there are different models, etc. So somebody asked me, what do you believe? I'm going to say I'm an agnostic. I withhold belief because there isn't enough evidence for me to either believe or disbelieve. And I think that, again, if that's the case, then that's an honest position to hold.
Definitely. And let me preface that as well, because
there's things you can know and there's things you cannot know. So if you can know what evolution is about the origin of human beings, then you can know what it is, where it comes from. So there is an answer which makes the most sense at the moment.
Yes, definitely. I guess, but it could be the case also. Well, you answer that, Kalam. I'm not going to answer for you.
Definitely, because I see answer here says, Kalam knows evolution is a scientific fact, okay? And just to, preface it for those people who are really truly wondering, as I said before, I've read up on evolution, and I do accept and agree with the theories of evolution. Okay, I'm going to put that out there. I actually accept and I agree with the theories of evolution. Am I certain? Okay, am I certain? My certainty would only come about if I have truly analyzed it from an objective and critical stance, i.e., reading outside of my comfort zone, reading what people outside of the theory of evolution has to say, reading how they have critiqued what the information that's presented itself. So I haven't done that, so I don't commit to say that I know. So far I can tell you I accept and agree with the theory of evolution. Okay, I accept and agree with the theory of evolution, but I do not know 100% or even 99% or 98% or 90% that it is true or factual, because I haven't taken the time out to experiment, one, or read externally and be critical of it.
Okay.
And now you've even made me 100% happy.
But I think that, but that's an interesting point, Kalam, because there's no way that we're going to be able to test and know all of these things. And I've been saying it recently in a number of chats, and maybe you can give me your thoughts on this. I personally think that it's reasonable to believe the overwhelming majority of experts in a particular field if the overwhelming evidence points in that direction. And if we assume that the overwhelming evidence and science or scientists are honest and they are persuaded because they understand the evidence and it points in a single direction, then I think that's reasonable to believe. I don't think we need to get to a knowing for all of us here, because we're never going to be able to test all these things about evolution or about cosmology. Yeah, exactly. So we've got to say, okay, at what point do we as lay people who are not going to be able to do this in a lifetime accept the overwhelming evidence and majority of experts? And I think that's a very reasonable position to hold, because everybody in fact does that to some degree or other. And what I notice with some people is they're quite happy to not do that, in the sense of cherry pick whenever they feel like it, and then dismiss science when they don't. And I think that's a a very harmful way of doing it. So I think your stance is a good one, in the sense that, okay, you're not going to be able to know everything personally, but you are justified, as I am and Stops and other people that care about these sort of things, in believing that to be the best theory. Could something change? Yes, it's possible, but it's the same as saying it's possible that we're going to be hit by a meteor. Now, it's very unlikely that's going to happen, or suddenly the Earth is going to stop going around the sun or something like that. So, from that point of view, I think it's fairly strong. But little things may change for sure, and really, once in a generation or something, there might be a paradigm shift, like the change in how the model of the universe happened. But that's a rare thing. When that happens, of course, why does it change? Because of good reasons and evidence. And I think that's the key thing to hammer home. So, good.
Is Kemet racist?
Is Kemet racist? So I guess we're talking about the philosophy itself. Is Kemet racist?
No. This is. I've actually wondered about this, because I sometimes see some claims being made where there are people who are saying, well, I'm your daddy, we are the origin, we are this and blah, blah, blah. But then this automatically means that you need to be black. Your pigmentation of the skin needs to have a certain value before you are allowed to even call yourself Kemet.
Okay. No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. Let me speak honestly, openly and honest. But actually, before I speak openly and honest, I would say this. We have, in Kemetic literature itself, we have something called the four goods that Ra created, okay? And in there, it talks about man was created, and this is mythos, by the way, just before anybody gets confused. Ra created man, or mankind, as equals. Okay, is only man in his own, evil or, inclination itself started to put one over another as being superior or inferior. Okay, initially, we don't have the concept as, this race is inferior to another race, or my race is superior to another race, and so forth. We don't have that in literally the literature of Kemet itself. Now, that's not to say that people inside of the Kemetic culture or the Kemetic community do not hold racial prejudices or racial views themselves. And I think a lot of them, especially from my American community, my American audience, they definitely do. They definitely do. And do I blame them for that? I actually don't blame them for that, because the reason I'm saying that is because they are bombarded with, racism and white supremacy over in America. And the only way they can counteract that is by utilizing, they would say right racism, and counter argue, counter it.
I like how you smile.
And counter it with, Africans or black people were the first on earth. So therefore we are the prime, we are the first, therefore we are superior, and everybody else, is like a copy or a degenerate, African or degenerate black man, i.e. through mutations and so forth, that they now are the inferior ones and so forth. Now, I don't particularly hold on to that. I can see, I understand the settings as to why they have to say it, because they're being bombarded with, black people are inferior, black people are monkeys, and all these things here. So then they now have to counteract it with things in their own mind to make them have some form of equality and pride. And, if you've been pushed down so much, you can't have a doctrine that makes you equal with the so-called white man. You need a doctrine that makes you superior to the white man just to make you equal. You dig what I'm saying? If you're inferior, if you've got an inferior, you can't be taught that you're equal, because you're still going to think, no, I'm actually beneath. But if you start thinking of yourself as being superior, you may just get to the level of being equal with whites, Asians, or whatever the case is.
So let me ask that question later, because there's a long question here that might take you a while to answer. So let me ask some of the sort of easier ones in some sense. What's Kemetic? What's the Kemetic philosophy on eating animals?
The Kemetic philosophy on eating animals, they yammed animals. Let me utilize correct English. They ate animals. Clearly, they ate animals. Certain groups or sects, for philosophical or spiritual reasons, would not eat animals, or certain types of animals, even beans. They wouldn't eat, or certain fishes they wouldn't eat, and things like that. But on a whole, the whole empire or the country itself, they all ate animals.
So they were okay with. Is there any sort of sense about how they kill the animals? Because obviously, modern day science says that, let's use the Islamic, methodology of halal. Animals suffer. And so what was the sort of methodologies in those days?
I don't know. I haven't done no studies on that.
Cool. Alrighty, not a problem. Explain it's a bit of a big question, but to whatever degree you feel comfortable and able to, explain the world and why we are here. That's just whatever you can.
Okay.
Maybe narrow it down a bit.
In a nutshell,
explain the world and why we are here.
Maybe the why we are here is the bigger thing. A lot of people feel like there has to be a cosmic why, and maybe you can talk on whether you think there is, and if so, what that might be.
Okay. So the why we are here, I think for me, and let me just see, do I have any basis on that actually? So the why we actually here is to find out why we are here and what do we have to offer to this world. That is why we are here. And that's me making something up on the spot, by the way, just if anybody gets confused by that, I'm making it up on the spot. I actually think that our purpose for being here is literally to find out what is our purpose. What is your purpose? What do you want to offer into this world? Now that you're here, regardless if you don't know why you're here or not here, but now that you are here, okay, what can you do whilst you are here? What purpose can you align yourself with to benefit the world? Are you here for a positive reason, or are you here for a negative reason? Are you here to give life, or are you here to cause death and destruction? So, me personally, I think for myself that my purpose is to find my purpose and to share it with the world.
Cool. I like that. And obviously there's a a similar view that I've read, because I always talk about it, which hopefully I'll get a chance to chat on your show at some point, about a sort of a God concept that talks about something very similar. So, you know, for me, that kind of resonates in that I've heard that before, and then that kind of makes sense. But a lot of people go, okay, if there's no cosmic why, you know, it's a very reductionist and I think very uncharitable view of the world, which is, hey, if there's no cosmic enforcer or cosmic judge or cosmic person to send all this information down, there is no cosmic why, and then we're all just atoms floating about. And I think that's an extremely uncharitable view, and I'm glad to hear that you have the view which is, you know, we can come down and make our own purpose and find out more about who and what we are, and you know, that makes sense to me. Good. Kalam, what is the...
Can you elaborate?
Sorry, carry on, Stops.
Okay, then can you in any... Okay, two things actually. Question A, energy. Is energy a concept that you go by because you are Kemet, or is this just Sarah's thing? And the second thing is, can you explain the concept?
Okay. This concept of energy, Sarah's thing. I think Sarah... Yeah, I'm seeing from live. Yeah, Sarah actually popularized energy. Sarah popularized energy itself. So is it a concept that I personally go by? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Definitely is a concept that I go by. I don't think I would explain it the way Sarah explains it, because I cannot prove certain things that Sarah says, although I do agree with what Sarah says, and I do think that Kemetic literature speaks a semblance of what Sarah says. But because I hold too strongly with my the first principle of Kemet, i.e. knowledge, and just basically speaking what you know, I tend to shy away from saying certain things.
Yes. No, I did not want you to explain Sarah, because Sarah was here and I forgot to ask him. I just wanted to know if this is purely him, if this is a Kemet thing, and if you can then explain your view, what the origin is, how this feeds into our everyday life.
Okay, so from a Kemetic, standpoint, how we all originated here, or whatever the case is, we have a principle called Nun. And let me see if I could actually share my screen with everybody real quickly.
So you're not talking about the way.
You muted yourself a little too quickly again, Stops.
Yes, you're not talking about the whale or the pen.
No, that's that's technically what's it called? That's Arab Muslim conceptualization. Although it's not too far off. So let's just see. Where do we have anything good here? Do we have anything good? Okay. All right. Let's just work with this, I guess. Yeah, let's work with this. So yeah, we have a concept right here, which is Nun. This is kind of it right here, Nun. And the Nun principle is the primordial waters. And Nun also has the meaning of inertness, like non-movement, just existence, just is, just all the substance, or I'm trying to shy away from using energy, because really and truly it is what energy is. So we have a concept of this Nun principle here, where everything, this is like the mass of everything in its potential state. And it will literally just be a river of water, or just an ocean, or just a mass of water. There is no beginning or end to it. There is no up or down from it. There's just all you can see. You wouldn't be able to see. You're just water. All there is just water in a as a principle, not as in reality, as in physical water, H2O, but just as in a analogy or metaphor for existence. All that there is, substance, all that there is, basically. So we do have this principle, which would be in a semblance of energy, or would be in the semblance of the quantum field itself. And then outside or inside of this energy, or this water, or this quantum field, there is a certain moving there is a certain moving that takes place within inside of it. We usually, depict it as the dung beetle here, the dung beetle. And we call this principle khepr, which means evolution or motion or coming to being. And as you can see, it's rolling something right here. And if you see the dung beetles at all in nature, it usually has, a small ball that it's just constantly rolling until it becomes like a snowball effect where it becomes massive and big. So it's just the principle of evolution in motion, or as an iconography for the Kemetic mind to understand. And then once this, rolls itself into a circular ball itself, everything comes out of it. This is the principle right here, which we'll call Ray or Ra, or Khepar, which would be the beetle, evolution, Ra, which would be the creator principle. And outside of this creator principle, we have the concept that everything came out of this ball or out of this Ra itself, and it literally explodes or pushes forward. We utilize certain metaphors where we say it spat out from itself, or it ejaculated from itself, or it sneezed from itself. Basically, embedding the principle that everything came from itself, but in a forceful projectile motion. So we would say, nuts and geb, or shoe and tef nut. These are certain principles. I wonder, do we see it here? No, we don't actually see it here. But we say these principles came out, shoe, tef nut, air, moisture, just, gushed out. We say that the universe, i.e. the heavens, nut, and the earth or landmass or physical objects literally came out of this as well. So, the solar system, the galaxies, everything just kind of gushed out from this primordial ball. But this primordial ball, let's see if I can do it like this. No, nope. This primordial, I don't have anything here that I can show you as an example, but this primordial ball is literally the whole universe, because everything is part of this universe, but it's still existing within inside of the primordial water. So if you could just imagine the primordial water right now, let me see if I can come back to myself. I hope I'm not losing everybody. I apologize. So if you could just imagine like the primordial.
No, this is fascinating. I mean, come on, we don't often get any kind of insight. This is why this is so valuable to be able, and I'm so grateful to you that that you are playing along, that we are allowed to pick your brain to explain these things at this level to us, because it's so rare that you get an insight into something like this, and this from somebody who knows his shit and knows how to bring it across. So I think this is highly valuable, and I thank you a great deal for doing this and making yourself available for this. Okay, I just want to say this to be very, very, very clear on this.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So you got this primordial water that's just everywhere, basically, and then within inside of the.
That doesn't mean I believe it. Okay, that doesn't mean I don't think this is just a nice fairy tale. Okay, but it's still fascinating to get some insight into the culture. Where everything comes from. This is what fascinates me.
Definitely. So inside of this primordial water, basically, you have, the universe, what we would say just the universe. It's the atom principle. So the whole, everything inside of this universe is this atom principle just in there. So that is kind of it. So everything is made up of this pre-existing energy, which is the primordial water, but it now manifested in physical form inside of itself, even to equate to what we see now as the universe. And the best way that I've seen other authors actually explain this as well is to say that it's the quantum field, and it's the Big Bang model, or the Big Bang that took place, the primordial atom that took place, and the whole, the whole birthing forth of things is literally what the ancient Egyptians were, penning down, basically.
Yeah, it's as you say, it's an interesting insight into what people believed at that stage. I guess, the question is, would one take that more allegorical in, today, where we've got a very clear understanding up until Planck time in terms of the universe? It's evolution, if you wish to use that term, and so on. And so, we can represent that a lot more accurately than perhaps those drawings did. But I guess if you're looking at the drawings more as kind of an allegorical and looking back as a historical of what these people believe, then from that point of view, I think it's fascinating. If you had to map that onto what we understand and how it looks today, there'd be a big difference in terms of, the literal understanding per se. But the allegorical, or as you put it, metaphorical, I think I made note of here, one can say that, it's similar. Obviously, Stops quite right. He said, I look at that picture and I would find that hard to see that matches our current understanding. But I could look back to people of that time and go, okay, that's what they understood to mean, what we kind of understand today. But I do think there's obviously fairly significant difference from a literal point of view. Moving on, what's the origin of the name Kalam? It appears to be coming from the Arabic name, which means Kalami. Obviously, it can't be an African name. That's a question from the chat.
Yeah, it's a Sudanic name, which most probably does originate in Arabic, and it literally means speech.
Okay, cool. There you go for the question who asked that. Kalam, what is the language that you are using when referring to those specific words? Now, this was a bit early in the chat, so I don't know what specific words. Is it Hebrew? What is the language you were using when you were referring to specific words? Is it Hebrew? So, I'm sorry, that part only came up now. So you might have been talking about something where you use certain words, and this person is asking, is it Hebrew? And I'm guessing it wouldn't be because, Kemet preceded Hebrew by some stretch.
Yes, the language I believe I utilized, if I did say anything in another language, would have been the Medu-Necha, or the speech of the divine. And that is the ancient Egyptian or the Kemetic language, or otherwise known as the hieroglyphs.
Ah, okay, good. Well, hieroglyphs, that's what I understand. Yeah. Go on, Swaps.
That's fascinating. No, I was also wondering about that. And I was thinking, is there a connection between the Egyptian today and the hieroglyphs of the day?
You've cut off again a little bit quickly. Stop, just leave your mic unmuted. Unless you're having something's going on in the background there.
So, yes.
No, unless it's me burping or something, no.
Yes, the Egyptian of today, well, technically the Egyptian of today is the Egyptian Arabic, but just prior to that, or what the Copts actually speak, i.e. the Christians of Egypt speak, would be the Coptic language, and that would be the later development or evolution of the ancient Egyptian hieroglyph or Medu-Necha language. It literally went through a few phases. You have Old Egyptian, you have Middle Egyptians, you have Late Egyptian, then you have the Coptic Egyptian itself. So yeah, it is the same language, but at its later stage.
So it's like 3rd century then.
The Coptic is, I believe, I can't remember now. Is it the 2nd century? 2nd, 3rd century?
Okay, but round about there. We're not talking about 500 BC or something, but it's around about there. Okay, round
about there. But what we're talking about when we say Medu-Necha, it's actually goes back to about 4000 BC or 5000 BC. But what I'm really talking is the Middle Egyptian. So that's roughly around 4000. Yeah, about 4000 BC. About 4000 BC.
Cool. Wow. Just a separate question. It was just interesting here. Kalam, next time you're in Speaker's Corner, because I've got no way to contact him, could you maybe get Bob off camera and ask him if he's interested to come on? What I typically say, and we've asked you a couple of questions, but I'd love to have Bob on as a guest, Bob the Builder, because obviously he's in Speaker's Corner. He's quite well known, and he's putting forward some challenges and so on. So somebody asked about it here, and I've been thinking about it. So maybe you could ask him on my behalf, because I don't know how else to contact him. So when you're next there, maybe you could do that, and also say to him, look, yes, we are atheists. The point of the show is to critique Islam. So with guests, and you're a guest here, we're not going to challenge you in a deep way on your views unless you say, hey, Rob, or he says, hey, Rob, yep, after I've shared some other stuff, you can go at it, you and Stops can go at it, you know, all guns blazing, then we'll do that. But, you know, the entire purpose of having a guest here is to get your thoughts on certain stuff and not to challenge you very deeply on your views necessarily, unless you're open to do that. So that's been our past history, certainly as long as I've been doing it. So maybe you can ask him. We're not going to necessarily challenge him deeply on Christianity. If he wants to talk about that at some point, great. But I'd like to have him on here as another guest. So I'm just saying that on the show because I don't know where else I could say that. So perhaps I could ask you to do that at some point.
No problem. I got you on that. I got you on that.
Before
we continue, can I get everybody who's tuned in right now, to just hit the like button? How can we have over 63 people tuned in right now? And we've only got 24 likes. Like, I don't understand it. It's either you're here to support Jinn&Tonic show, or you're not here to support Jinn&Tonic show. I would know by the ratio of likes and dislikes. But please hit the like button. Let us know that you're here, you're enjoying the information, you're participating. Drop some questions, drop some comments, and if you haven't already subscribed, what are you on? Subscribe. This is the home, of great conversations from atheists to Buddhists to Kemetics to Christians to Muslims. So please hit the subscribe button and tune in and participate in future shows and check out the past shows as well. Oh man,
there you go. Thank you, Kalam, man.
Can you just pop in for 5 minutes every Friday evening?
just to do that little bit, like a radio talk show.
Yeah, that's great.
Somebody asked in the chat there, why just critique Islam? Because that's what the show is primarily about. So everybody's show can do whatever they want. Kalam is much more broad. He will cover a lot more. We will have people from various faiths on here, but it's often because they are critics of Islam, or we want to hear something about their views on some other topic, like Kalam on Kemet. And so that's the nature of the show, and that's why we don't come on here. And unless occasionally we've had Christians on where we don't have a guest, and we've had Christians on, and there's some shows you can go back to where we've challenged Christians. Anybody who's got a view other than an atheist view is welcome to come on the show. So if you're listening to this and you want to join the show, then you're more than welcome to join the show, and we will have a conversation with you. But I do make it a rule that with a guest like I've got with Kalam here, we're not going to go in deeply unless he's open to do that. There's a lot of other things we can talk about anyway. So that's just the view that I do with that. But if Kalam came on as a panelist and said, hey, Rob, I'm going to throw Kemet in your face and let's have a deep on discussion, then we can do that. But at this stage, I'm not necessarily going to be doing that. So it's more questions, then we'll get into a bit of a chat. But I think, Stops, you were saying something about a segue, so maybe it is sort of, unless there's any other questions on Kemet. But I think I've learned a lot about this. There's a show here now that people can go back to in the beginning part of the show at least and go, okay, so now you can point it to, you've probably done this many other times anyway, Kalam, but for the audience here, it's the first time that they would have heard it explained in your way, and you've answered many of the questions. So I do thank you. There's maybe one or two more here. But, what's your thoughts, Stops?
Now, I wanted to use this now because we are now going towards Islam, because one thing that has impressed me no end is your amazing depth of knowledge when it comes to Islam. And I was wondering, how the fourth do you know so much about the history of Islam? Because no matter who is asking you, on what topic, in what area, as soon as it comes to Islam, you are the man. You have the answers. Why?
Oh man, good question. Actually, very good question.
Of course.
Do you know what? Back in the day, we used to have a lot of study sessions. I used to have loads of study sessions with my American community. And again, for those of you guys who know the American community, I'm talking about the conscious community. Let me shout out a few names, actually. So let me shout out Sarnetta TV, shout out Black News 102. Is there any channels I'm missing out? Amun Ra Squad, Real Black Atheists, Team Osiris, Asar Hotep. Who else should I have made mention of? The Magi. Just dropping a few names, just so it's just out there in the realms of the ethers. So we used to have loads of great study sessions themselves, and just loads of questions and topics we would raise. And one of them was Islam. So I think I was challenged at one point. I was challenged to actually write up something on Islam itself and present it. So I actually wrote up, I wrote a book. I say a book. I wouldn't even classify it as a book. But I wrote a thesis on it, actually. And it was hidden, the origins of Islam. Yeah, hidden, the origins of Islam, hidden the East African origins of Islam, something along those lines. I forget about it. This is maybe about 5 years ago or so. So I actually wrote something on this, and I took my time out to really study Islam. So I studied Islam. I, posed some questions on Islam because people wanted to know some questions relating to, the African, how does Africa actually relate to Islam? Is there any African presence in the origins of Islam? What was the African experience with Islam and things of that nature? So those types of questions were asked, and I actually posed them in the thesis themselves, and I've done the research behind it. So that's the first time I really got interested to learn such great knowledge and information on Islam. Of course, prior to that, I did have family who were Muslims. I did learn a lot of things from them in that respect. I used to, little story here. Back in the day, I was a person that was always curious, into knowledge, into information. So my Sundays used to be spent like this. Sunday morning, I used to go to church in Brixton, Ruak, actually. I used to sit there and hear what the pastor has to say for an hour until my head couldn't stand it anymore. I'm like, yeah, it's cool, but like it's preaching and I'm not really learning anything. Okay, cool. So from there, we used to go now to the mosque in Brixton. You meet up with a few friends there, sit down, gain some information, learn some knowledge. After that's finished, and I can't be bothered with, just hearing Arabic all day long, I'm now moving over to, the Pan-African conversation. So I'll go over into another bookstore in Brixton and sit down and listen to them speak to me about African culture and history and things of that nature. So I've always been interested in Islam, or interested in religions, and interested in African culture and all those things there from a very young school, college, from a young age anyways, very, very young age. So I've always had that interest in it. It was only later on, about 5 years ago, that I really took time out to really learn Islam. And then even then, I just forgot about it. I was like, okay, I've learned it. I've written it up, read it. Tell me what you think about it and so forth. Threw that away because, it has no practical application to me in my life. So I threw that away, and then afterwards.
What were you reading? What was it that you were reading? What is it that you...
I read everything that I could find in English that was source material relating to the early development of Islam. So I would have read the Sirah literature, the Maghazi literature, the Tabakat literature, the 6 books of Sahih Hadiths. I would read Ibn Kathir's. Yep, I'll read tafsirs. I would read, I think I've read as much as I possibly can read that source material that's in English on Islam. So that's why I was reading.
Not people like Goldsea.
Is that the hidden as well? Is that another one, that the origins of Islam as well?
Sorry, I'm muting yourself. The Orientalist.
Yep, the Orientalist, German Orientalist. I think he wrote The Origins of Islam, right? Is that the one?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, I read yes, I did. I've read his work as well. Who else? There was quite a few other Orientalists as well that I've read. Patricia Crone. There's a few of them. That I've read as well. So
then you've got Montgomery and the whole tutti. Okay.
Yeah. So I read. I was like, okay, cool. I'm listening. I'm hearing it from all different perspectives. But afterwards, I just threw it away. There's no use. There's no practical use. Like, is it making me money? No. Am I utilizing it in my day-to-day life? No. Does anybody around me actually care so we can have some type of intellectual conversations on it? No. Okay, time to throw it away then. So that side of my brain, I was like, throw away. Then I got invited to Speaker's Corner by Isa. So shout out to Isa. Most of you lot might know him. He's the Black Shia guy, Isa the Great. He was the first one to actually introduce me to Speaker's Corner. So I came down to Speaker's Corner. I started filming the debates over there, as well as putting on my shows, Talk with the Titans, on my channel. And much later on, people said, Kalam, I recognize that you have knowledge. Talk to us about Islam. Answer these questions on Islam. And then I started to dive back into Islam and just, picking up, just remembering things that was in my brain about Islam. And then, going into questions. I'm hearing questions every single day about Muslims this, Islam that, and so forth. So I was like, okay, let me go back and just, you know, dig out those old school books and refresh my memory on it. And yeah, that's kind of it. That's just kind of it. I've just refreshed my memory on Islam and just answering questions that people, you know, throw my way pertaining to Islam.
It's amazingly refreshing to see somebody who knows these things when somebody is being challenged or asked these questions who actually has some substance. And this is...
You've muted yourself again, buddy.
I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm so used to, why did it work in the past that I was able to say something, end the sentence, without having to say full stop?
Yeah.
Is that
cool.
Kemetic
So
magic?
on the sort of moving over to the Muslim side, somebody actually asked a question in regards to that. Could Muslims basically adopt the Kemet principles, or does the person have to be black, since Kemetism refers to blackness?
No, somebody could adopt the Kemetic principles themselves. You don't actually need to be black or dark skinned. I say it like this. I usually say it like this. We had different people in the Kemetic empire that literally ruled the landmass of Kemet. You know, you had the Persians that came in roughly in the 5th century BCE that came in. You had the Macedonians, i.e. Alexander the Great, that came in and ruled. Then you have the Greeks after him that ruled. Then you had the Romans after them that ruled, and they were considered to be pharaohs. They had the highest position in Kemet. They were some of them also became priests as well. So you don't need you know, and some of them even synthesized Kemetic principles into Greek principles and so forth. So I say you don't need to be dark skinned or African or black to adopt Kemetic philosophy at all. You could be any race, any color, any complexion to do it. I don't like to. I don't even call myself a Greek or anything like that. Just because I read Aristotle and Plato and you know, all of these things. I don't know how, you know, you don't convert to it. You just simply read it. It influences you and affects you. I personally think as well that there's a lot of, you know, baseline Kemetic principles already inside of the Quran for those people who truly, you know, read and listen to what the Quran is actually saying. Some of those principles are actually embedded in it, embedded inside of, you know, the Christian Bible, embedded inside of Judaism, or even inside of the mystical schools such as Kabbalism or Sufism or Freemasonry itself.
Cool. What's the question here? Kalam, what... I want you to talk... So this,
do you think that Islam is racist from your knowledge?
So it depends on how we define Islam. If we define Islam by the Quran, I would say no. If we're defining Islam, you know, based upon the, you know, the development of it, the hadiths, if we're basing it upon what the scholars were writing, you know, later on, and we say this is what makes up Islam, then you would definitely find a lot of racism within inside of, you know, the Islamic world, in terms of its authority figures, trickling down into their literature. We can definitely find racism inside of the Islamic world, full stop. Or I would say Muslimdom. I want to let me utilize the word Muslimdom. There is clearly racist Muslims all over the world. And I think that doesn't just come from their culture. That actually comes from the literature, you know, that's been precipitated higher up. So in a sense, yes, and in a sense, no. If we're talking about the pure Islam, i.e. what the Quran was teaching, no. But in terms of its development, it definitely became racist, yes.
I think that's a good answer. You probably heard it also, this what is a black in Arabic, what is a slave in Arabic, both are abd. So it's...
Yes, exactly. So you can clearly see that, you know, within inside of the, you know, language itself, the language, you know, the Arabic language itself, you know, holds very racial connotations towards black people, or racist connotations towards black people, indeed.
Cool. Somebody's asking here, we'll get back to the question I asked earlier in the show, which I think sort of fits in now, and it may relate to this, or maybe you can give us a context on what this question is. I would like you to discuss, the person asked, I would like you to talk about the superiority of the veil of ignorance.
Okay. I don't fully well know what that is about. I don't fully well know, so I'd rather not speak on something that I don't fully well know. I can think that I know, but I don't want to be presumptuous to say this is what you're talking about and answer it based upon that. So
Fair
if there
enough.
could be, if there's any like clarifier of what it means, then I'll go ahead.
No, that's it at the moment. If somebody puts in the chat what they meant by that, then that's all good and well. Kalam, but here is an interesting question, I think. Kalam, what is the most, I want you to talk about the cognitive dissonance that Muslims display when you drop information in I'm putting in inverted commas. So obviously when you share stuff, what can you talk about the cognitive dissonance that Muslims display? That's the question from the chat.
Yeah. Do you know what? It's when you've been brought up in a certain paradigm, and especially when you're praying 5 times a day, okay? Especially when you're praying 5 times a day and you're being reinforced with these ideas or concepts and so forth, and you're always taught that you are in the right, and in this book there is no doubt. So you're filled with ego and arrogance. And I'm going to put it like that. I'm not saying that all Muslims are filled with ego and arrogance. Please, like, miss me with that. I'm just simply saying that you are literally filled with this thinking that you're 100% right. You're 100%. There is 100% Allah. There is 100% heaven, and all these things here. And you're kind of reinforced with this, and everybody else are kuffars, and everybody else don't know what they're talking about, and so forth and so forth. Like, no matter what you say to these individuals, okay, who are fully brainwashed into this, or brain numbed, should I say, not brainwashed, brain numbed into thinking like that, is very difficult to get through to them. Very difficult to get through to them. You could tell them, 1 + 1 = 2, and they will say, "Astaghfirullah, you're a liar." But then if their imam comes and says 1 + 1 = 2, they will say, "Alhamdulillah, you're telling the truth." So it's very difficult thing to do, to get through to those individuals anyway.
Yeah, and I've had the same experience both at Speaker's Corner and on some of the chats as well. When you can see there's a logical contradiction, or there's a problem with whatever's being said, and you just ask some questions, and when you attempt to point that out, it's like there's a stubborn refusal. I almost think of it like it's either dodging, deflecting, or denying. So the 3 Ds for me is what I notice happens, and it's very rare, although, again, this is not all Muslims. I want to be clear. I say it's not all Muslims. In fact, I've had a Muslim who has shifted a position on at least some points, and another Muslim on a particular thing, the way he could see it was logically contradictory. And he was like, "Oh, okay, now I understand. I get you. And yeah, I can see why that's wrong." He obviously didn't necessarily know, didn't have time at that moment in time to go into, well, okay, if you now see the contradiction, then there's a problem, because that says something about the book that you got this information from. And I think Stops would probably say, similar things. We just notice that the level of being able to rationalize things is not, and this is again not for everybody, so I want to make clear that I'm not saying all Muslims are stupid. There's obviously very smart Muslims out there as well, but the type of Muslims that I and possibly yourself interact with seem to have this problem, that when you share some information, there's just a sort of, when it's blindingly obvious. This is not a case of, okay, you're talking about something that somebody has to go research, but when it's a contradictory fact, or they're making a claim that is clearly contradictory to anybody that can employ logic and rationale, it's just not, like the free will and omniscience paradox, or you and I, when we've talked about, how can the universe have been created from nothing and not from God? These things to you and me, and we've used those examples, just it's unable to penetrate there, and you've tried it yourself. So maybe, talk about some of those instances, if you can, where you've come up and you've explained these things, and to you and to everybody else that is non-Muslim, even Christians, I would suspect, or well, some Christians possibly, can see that there's a problem there. You're just not getting the response, or you're not getting any feedback that lets you know that it's sort of being comprehended.
I think one of the ones that we do we used to do every single week, and it was very funny, because they would all agree, they themselves will come up with this principle itself. Something can't come from nothing. Okay, cool. Yeah, I agree. I have never witnessed something coming from nothing. Okay. Now, and then they go on to say, but God created this universe from nothing. Huh? You said something can't come from nothing, but then this something came from nothing. How did that work? Don't you see the contradiction there?
No, it's dualism.
No.
It's dualism. This is the problem. It's dualism. It can't be unless it's God.
It can't be unless it's God, did you say?
Yes. That's why it's dualism. You have these things where this is not possible unless it is God. The same thing with, do you believe that ants can talk? No, but if God wants them to talk, then they will talk. Can God create a bit, something indestructible? No, but yes, he can. If he wants to, and if he can, he can also destroy it. So there's no problem in this dualism. It just takes a God to be able to do anything. You can slap a corpse with a piece of steak and revive it if this God actually wants it to. That's it. Easy.
Yeah, and I think those sort of claims are unfalsifiable. I think it would be more accurate if somebody said, hey, you can't create something from nothing except God can do that. Then at least that statement would be fully accurate in the sense of their worldview. Now, obviously, we would challenge that. But actually, as far as that goes, Kalam, that particular one, I'm personally, and again, what you just said is absolutely correct. I'm less, I don't normally push that point because I go, okay, so what about, let's use their worldview. Let's assume that we're standing in their worldview and go, okay, so something can't come from nothing. And what they should say is except for God, which they don't. But like you say, when you press the point, you get to that final point, then they will say God. I go, okay, let's assume that's the case. And be as charitable as you can. What does that mean, and how could that work? Because I think we can do that. And the same thing, I'm not that much of a fan personally, but other people maybe, and they could give me good reasons that would help me with this. When somebody says God created everything, and then the question comes, well, who created God? Now, in the worldview that these guys and girls and women and people live in, God is the final thing. And they will obviously point to philosophy and go, well, you can't have an infinite regress, which in fact we don't know whether that's true or not. Mathematically, it's not a problem. We just don't know whether there's an actual infinite in the real world. But I'm not that concerned with going, okay, so where did God's creator come from, or whatever the case is? Because in their world, I'm going, okay, it terminates with God. Now, we can have many of those challenges, but I want to challenge them on their actual worldview, because then you're in there. So I don't know, what's your thought in terms of some of the other arguments that do you try and avoid going into their worldview, or do you step in there sometimes and then try and challenge them from within their own paradigm?
Yeah, I try to fully delve in there with them. I try to fully understand where they're coming from. So I would study their their methodology of understanding the scriptures, so I can know where I can go with them, so I can see where exactly are they limited, because it's the methodology. Like they have Akida books, books on Akida, which is like their creed itself, and it literally tells you how to think. It literally tells you how to think, and it tells you, if somebody asks you how did Allah rise upon his throne, you cannot answer that question. You can't even think. You can't even try to fathom how Allah rose upon his throne. Just say that Allah rose on his throne. Don't ask how, don't ask why, don't ask any of those questions there. Just know that it is. Just think that it is, and that's it. I'm like, oh, okay. Now I understand the psychosis. I understand. I fully understand now. Prior, if you're outside of it, you can't really understand why can't they say things, or why can't they think? Like you're literally, you're literally going ahead with a deductive argument, or you're going ahead and they're agreeing, yes, 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 and then you just literally hit a wall, a barrier that's like, they can't go that extra step. And you're always thinking, but why can't you go that extra step? It makes sense, but why is it you can't make that go beyond that extra step? And usually it's because it's to do with shirk, or whether it's to do with blasphemy, or whether it's to, this means that you're an apostate. This takes you outside of Islam. So it's the fear of God in your mind that you're burning in hell if you admit to this, and so forth. So I like to jump 100% into their paradigm and argue with them based upon that. Because if I go from outside, and my brother Sarah is phenomenal of arguing from an outside perspective. He doesn't even jump in really with them. He argues from an outside perspective, just pure logic, and he will beat them to the ground. And I commend him for that. I commend him for that. I just tried to go for the softer approach and be like, okay, let me agree with you. Let me, yes, Allah does exist. Yes, Prophet does exist. The Quran is, yes, no problem. But let's argue from within inside of your scripture itself, so you can come to a firm conclusion. Like, you know, your scripture itself tells you to utilize science, to utilize knowledge, to utilize, things like that. Don't simply accept things, don't simply believe things, but actually know it. I tried to go from that angle with them, so it's not so harsh and so brash with them. I tried to at least think on your paradigm itself.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely room for different approaches. I think like yourself and Stops, who have read more of the literature, that have gone through many of these, that have challenged many of the ideas, are more equipped to do that, whereas perhaps like Sarah and I are more equipped to go from the outside and go with the bigger questions and look at the logical contradictions just in the main worldview as opposed to the small things. So I think there's different views on that. I want to welcome in also one of our regular panelists. This is TJ Singh. He is based in the US and often joins us. So TJ, welcome. I don't know if you've got a question. If not, that's not a problem. You can always ask one later on. I think there's still more questions to come, but I did want to welcome you because I did see you pop in there. So welcome to you. Let's have a look. Anything else from your guys' side first? So TJ or Stops, have you got any other questions for Kalam? If there's anything in the chat, by the way, please highlight speakers live because I can't see it otherwise, and then send us a question, say speakers.live, and then give us your question for Kalam, and then I can see it because obviously there's a lot of chat going on that it's difficult to follow there.
Yeah, I just want to ask, do you see any similarities between Kemet thought and maybe Hindu thought?
Kemet and Hindu?
Yeah.
I'm going to say I haven't studied Hindu well enough to draw comparisons. I believe, what's my brother's name? Farhan Qureshi. He speaks on it and he does draw comparisons and correlations, but I personally haven't studied it, so I won't speak upon it.
And also, just to touch upon when we talk about Islam and Black, could you talk about maybe the Arab slave trade and how that actually impacted Africans?
Yeah. Wow. The Arab slave trade. You know what? Let's see. Can I point everybody to a book to buy? I'm actually trying to look right now. I'm looking at my bookshelf, Where is it? Okay. Maybe you have to give me some while. I'll come back again and I'll point you guys to an excellent book to buy. That speaks about the Arab slave trade. Actually, it's more of the Middle Eastern slave trade, because it wasn't just simply the Arabs or the people that we equate to being Arabs that was involved with the slave trade. There was other ethnicities as well that was a part of the slave trade as well. And there was also a lot of Africans as well that was actually part of the slave trade themselves. So yeah, the Arab slave trade or the Middle Eastern slave trade was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And again, they actually wrote a lot of things to allow it to be permissible. They literally wrote things into their histories, into their annals, such as, some people might have heard about this, such as the curse of Ham. So they wrote things as the curse of Ham into their histories to kind of explain why it's permissible to enslave African people. They wrote things that Africans were dumb, almost animal-like creatures. They were deformed. They had all of these, mental deficiencies. They were like brutes, like beasts, and all different types of things of that to actually, change the attitude and mood towards African people. Because prior to the 8th, 9th century, there was actually a really highly elevated, viewpoint of African people or Black African people. The Habesha, the Aksum Empire, which was annexed to the Medina and Mecca and so forth, was a highly advanced civilization that literally conquered the Arabian Peninsula in the 6th, 7th century, and even prior to that in the 2nd and 3rd century. So it was very advanced, highly cultivated civilization. So they looked up to the Africans at one point, but afterwards, you know, the mood started to change. They started to write very derogatory, negative things about the Africans to kind of, you know, make it permissible to enslave the Africans. And they went quite far and wide in actually enslaving them, brutalizing them, castrating them. You know, they did some crazy things. They even started to enslave Muslims all the way over in Nigeria. Sorry, Nigeria, am I lying? No, I'm telling the truth. Yeah. In Nigeria, they actually enslaved Nigerians. They enslaved, I'm going to repeat it again. They enslaved Nigerians who were Muslims. Okay. And then you had the Nigerian, you know, king or Oba itself that was writing to, in Cairo to the Egyptians to say that the slavers are actually enslaving, you know, African Muslims. You know, can you get these people back? So, you know, it didn't matter. It didn't matter if you were a Muslim or not. They thought they were protected just because they were Muslims, but it didn't matter to the enslavers themselves. They said, you're African, we're going to enslave you regardless. So yeah, the slavery, the Arab slavery or the Middle Eastern slavery was something that was horrible, absolutely horrible. I would even say it was worse than the European slave trade itself.
Yeah, I just saw a little bit on that somewhere again, and you know, I'm quite happy to stand corrected, but the numbers that I saw was sort of 8 to 10 million in the European slave trade, and anywhere from 80 to 120 million over a longer period of time, clearly than the European slave trade, being, you know, Arab slave trade, and many of them died en route. Whereas the numbers, there was about a 10%, give or take. That's the numbers that I've seen. Deaths of, you know, the slaves being taken from Africa to America. The numbers were somewhere in the region of 70 to 80% being taken from Africa, across Africa to the Middle East. So the numbers were, you know, as you quite rightly said, were pretty horrific. And I don't think anybody on if I can use that term, on the European side is going to deny that happened. But I do find it fascinating how Muslims in particular want to claim that it's got nothing to do with Islam. It was Arabs, but not Muslim Arabs. Oh, we've lost Kalam there. Hopefully he's there still. Kalam, are you still there?
Still here.
Oh, okay, we've just lost your audio, so I'll wait for you there. Not a problem.
Maybe he's looking.
Stop. Unmute yourself. Just leave it all.
He's looking for the book. Full stop. 3.
Okay, cool. No, sounds good. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see the book. I'm just looking to see in the chat here if there's any other questions. If you've got any further questions for Kalam, then let us know. Stops and TJ, if you've got any more questions. We want to sort of, we've moved the sort of conversation on, so it's more a case of what's Kalam's view on some of the Muslim or Islamic topics. Go ahead.
The one thing that I would like to know is whether you, Kalam, have any questions to us, what we think of Islam or whatever, or what our involvement is, and how much you know about us and where we all come from, and what this whole Gin and Tonic show is, what you know about this, what you've heard about this. And, you know, I just left.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I'll ask a question actually. So what exactly is the motivation behind the Gin and Tonic show?
Stops, maybe you can answer because you've been doing it for a lot longer. I've sort of taken over or co-taken over with Stops because you had a change in lifestyle. But Stops, you go back to the original days.
Well, the idea was that in the beginning there was only there was a handful of us. There were only 4 or 5 people who were addressing Islam. Everybody else was, you know, banging on Christianity, and that the atheist experience was very popular. Then the Magic Sandwich show came on, and then we said, well, because it was Clean Shaw, it was Rationalizer, it was Hassan, it was a couple of people, and we said we need something like that. We need a platform where we can discuss Islam, you know, from an objective point of view, where we are not proselytizing, we are not going and like giving any kind of Muslim perspective information, but as fact-based as possible. So we always try to go according to what the objective scholar said, what even Patricia Crowner said, and what I mean, there are so many people, and we try to distinguish between what the Zakir Naik said in those days, what Ahmed Didat said in those days, and try to get the middle ground here to say, yes, we understand where you come from. Yes, we understand you're trying to make it look modern, but look what you're doing. Look what you're trying to do with what you are doing at the moment. Look at the consequences. We were then the sort of the outlet for anybody who was more rational and trying to look at Islam from an objective point of view, from a non-believer point of view, not from a Christian point of view, bashing Islam. Well, you are worse. My God is stronger than you're strong. My God is stronger than your God, or whatever. Trying to be as rational as possible and giving a platform for people who could call in and say, well, I have a question, or, well, I don't agree with you, or what is it that brings you to say these things? And this is the whole background of what the Jinn&Tonic show was about. It was also tongue-in-cheek. It was also debunking all the claims, especially the miracle claims in the Qur'an, like the numerical claims, the 19, and all these other things. And what we did is we invited scholars both from a Muslim background and from a critic point of view. So we had Tom Holland, we had I don't know, a whole lot of people on the show.
Wow. Absolute wow. Absolute wow. Tom Holland. Okay, I'm gonna sound like a fanboy right now.
We also had Muslim clerics. We also had Muslim we had Professor Sayed, we had Edip Yüksel. There's a lot of people that we had on the show also from the Muslim side to give both sides a voice.
And I have to ask this question. Which show would you say was the most informative and thought-provoking that completely changed your perspective on Islam? Or which guest, should I say?
That's actually quite difficult to say, because somebody like Professor Sayed, from a Muslim perspective, gave me a total different view than somebody. I mean, I think the most impressive was probably Professor P.Z. Myers, or maybe Tom Holland, I don't know. But these are things that I already knew. So they were confirming something that I already either suspected or knew. Whereas somebody like Professor Sayed totally changed my perspective on what a Muslim, this is coming back to what you were saying earlier, what a Muslim would see as their perspective from within their own belief system. So it helped me to understand a lot better what they were about. It helped me to understand why they were doing what they were doing, which I didn't understand before because I've been living with them. But when you are living in a Muslim majority country, it's very difficult to get an opinion on Islam because you need to tread very carefully. So it's different things and different aspects, different viewpoints, and you know, different things from all sorts of different viewpoints. I think that is what gave me the biggest kick.
And if you know, if Islam is to be taken seriously in the intellectual realm, what do you think? You know, what type of reforms do you think it needs to actually have? Or can it be taken seriously?
You can't take Islam seriously the way that it is run today. There's no way. You absolutely must come up with a Quran 2.0. If you don't do that, you're lost. Because as soon as you go and you put the Quran in the middle as the centerpiece of your belief, of your political, of your spiritual, of everything that it is in your belief system, you can't. Because my favorite question to a Muslim is always, do you believe that slavery, and then I define slavery as what I think slavery is part of 21st century Europe? And of course they will say no. And then I will ask, well, is a book that would propagate this slavery part of 21st century Europe? And that's when they shut up, because they realize that whatever they say now, it's going to be wrong. So then it doesn't matter whether they say, well, slavery is actually good because it wasn't the slavery that we're talking about. And actually, slavery is something that we had to have because we had to take care of the women that were left over after the wars and things like that. You know, it's dishonest. It's totally dishonest. And if you do not take that out of the book, if you do not say that the Quran is for all people, for all times, and it says in there that you're not allowed to marry Muhammad's wives, you are making an absolute fool of yourself. This is the point.
I think that's the big thing, Kalam, as you probably know as well. If the claim was not, as Stops said, that this book is a book for all people for all time, or words to that effect, and they said, hey, this was a book for the 7th century, moved on from now, we can take some allegorical stories like the Christians do, and then some of these claims would not be, or many of these claims we wouldn't be talking about if they didn't try and defend slavery and and various other things. Then we wouldn't be talking about this. We would have gone, okay, that's what happened then. Okay, we can say it was bad then. We've improved since now. It might even have been slightly better. They may have even improved it ever so slightly from what it was prior to Islam coming into. That could be argued. Maybe the case. Some people would say no, that's not the case. Maybe some would say it is the case. Whatever the case is, but to say today that this is a book for all time, for all people, and then to try and defend some of these practices or to make some of these claims that they do, I mean, it's just incredible. I don't know how they can possibly do this, but it happens on a regular basis, as you're well aware anyway.
That's true. That's true. I've kind of started my campaign of somewhat to make them rethink that. Actually rethink whether the Quran was actually sent to all people at all times. I don't know if you've seen any of my recent conversations or debates with them. I'm saying to you, like, you would make more sense if you literally say that the Quran, being in an Arabic language, sent to an Arabic people for an Arabic generation, makes more sense than it being sent to the whole world. Like, that's when Islam becomes a problem in my eyes. If Islam sticks to its paradigm as I've perceived it to be, sticks to that location for that time frame, I've got no problem with it. But once you start to take Islam and then have that imperialistic ideology where everybody must now become Muslim and we are the standard and everybody must now adopt it and we must be the ones in charge and tell you you have to learn Arabic through us and all those things there, like, that's where I have a problem. Leave Islam where it should be left and don't come over here and trying to impose it on me. Your Islam will be perfect that way.
Yes, and of course that's obviously not the case that's happening there. So you get all kinds of manner of excuses. Hey, you've got to learn Arabic, or why don't you learn Arabic? This was a book claim for all people of all time, and that's obviously one of my points as well. If this book was or if the message from Allah was supposed to be sent to all people of all time, it would have been so crystal clear that no interpretation would ever be necessary. Scholarship would have been completely unnecessary, and it would have been interpretable or not interpretable, actually, because you wouldn't need to. You would just be able to read and go, okay, I understand it perfectly. And it would be in such a way that the language would run all through time. Because when you look at the English translations and then you ask some questions on that, you can get back to a point where they say, no, forget about the English translations. You've got to read it in Arabic. And then when you get somebody like Stops or Bob the Builder who has read or got somebody else to read the Arabic that are expert, then of course the claim goes, oh, well, you personally can't read Arabic, therefore you can't criticize, when in fact you're bringing legitimate criticisms from people who have read Arabic and or the Arabic interpreters themselves. And so you get to this point where it just becomes unfalsifiable, or you get claims that just get to a point where it just becomes absurdity, really.
100, man. That's why I say keep your Islam, keep your Quran, keep it to yourself, man. Keep it to yourself. Because if I can't understand it, then there's no point of me actually having it. So just keep it to yourself. Save yourself the hassle.
And I would agree with you. I don't think we'd be having this if people kept the beliefs to themselves at home, but they don't, and it affects the world around us. And therefore, like yourself, myself, and other people, and Stops, and TJ, and others are going to speak out and go, hang on a moment. You guys want to, proselytize and to say that this is supposed to, number one, be true, and number two, be good, and number three, that other people should adopt your view, then we are going to challenge this. And everybody's going to do it in a different way, be it a Sarah, a Tan, myself, yourself, whoever it may be. And welcome to the 21st century, at least in free, civilized societies. That's what you need to deal with. So But clearly this still seems to be a problem, and a problem for particular Muslims in Speaker's Corner. Again, not all Muslims, and you will, I'm sure, agree with that, but there's a certain group of particular Muslims that actually, in my view, they're the best anti-Dawah adverts you can possibly have. Let these guys keep doing what they're doing. They're undermining all the other Dawah that's going on. We could just sit back and just watch, and anybody who looks at some of these people go, there's a few of them that could quite happily be in ISIS front line at the moment. So as soon as people who are not Muslim hear these people, they go, holy crap, these are extremists. Now, unfortunately, not everybody's like that, but these guys give it. And I've heard from Muslims personally, who I will not name, who have apparently spoken to some of these extremists, but it's like water off a duck's back. These guys, obviously just keep doing what they're doing. So there you go.
That's right. That's right. Rob, I don't know how much longer you don't want me here,
No, I think we've got on well, and you've done an awesome job. So I think, Stops, if you can, have we got a hadith of the day? We normally finish off the
oh, give me 10.
Yeah, no problem. We normally finish off the show with a hadith of the day that either Stops or my other co-host who's not with us today, Abu, normally reads. So, just to say thank you, Kalam, for your time, for sharing all your things, some of your views. I really appreciate it. It's great to get a different perspective on something that has been talked about in Speaker's Corner that we didn't really have much of an understanding on, and you've at least given us the first tiptoe step in that direction, and at some point, maybe we can go into it in more depth and so forth, and have a little look under the hood, so to speak, in a way. But I really wanted to understand it more from this point of view, and then obviously touch on a few other subjects. So I think awesome from you. Thank you very much indeed. Stick with us just for a few moments so that we can get that. If you're a Muslim who's watching at the moment and you want to join some kind of after show, it won't necessarily be with Kalam, because I'm sure he's got other things to do. He's not going to sit here till midnight. He would sometimes do that on his own show, but then he normally starts much later in the day, much later in the evening. So, we can't expect Kalam to be sitting around for 4 or 5 hours. So I'm not going to ask him to do that. But if you as a Muslim, because there was somebody here who wanted to join the show. What I'm not interested in, by the way, if you're a Muslim, is to come and talk about other Muslims. The purpose of you coming on here is to share your view about Islam and why you think it's true. Some infighting among Muslims, I'm not that interested in that. You can do that some other time, make a video, whatever, send me a message, I might read it out or something like that. But if you're going to come on here, then we are going to have a conversation with you about what you believe and why, and not because you're claiming that some other people are not a Muslim according to you. That's not really, from my point of view anyway. Maybe Stops would want to do that, but that's not necessarily what I'm here for, to have Muslim on Muslim communications in that way. I mean, that happens on occasion when they come in here, but that's not really the purpose of this show. So Stops, hopefully that's enough. If you've got something ready there, please do share it and I'll set it up for you here.
I'm screen sharing, but it's black.
Yeah, and maybe it's that you need a different browser. I think that was the case in the past, where you had to go into a different browser to screen share. Some of the browsers, like I've noticed, when you're not the mod, when you're not
I'm now using Chrome.
Yeah, Chrome didn't work for me. So Chrome will work if you are the host of the show, but in my experience anyway, Chrome didn't work for me when I was not the host. I could not click on that button. I would click, 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 and nothing happened. So it maybe you need a different browser. I mean, Kalam, you've been doing this for ages anyway. Any quick last few thoughts on anything that we can tweak? Is anything in the Hangouts, really? I mean, this is not Islam or anything like that. You've been doing this for such a long time. Any tips or tricks in terms of running the Hangout any differently or better, or is any bugs that you've encountered that we could improve upon or let people know about?
To be honest, I'm encountering some new things on your show that I've never encountered before, such as the 500 internal server error that's coming up. So I don't know how to get rid of that, to be honest with you. But so far, the way that you're running your show is perfect. I can't fault you on anything. I think I can learn a thing or two from you and the way that you format your show.
Oh, appreciate that. It was more on the technical side, because you've obviously done that for quite a while. So no, that's good. And the other thing, again, just a reminder for everybody watching, please subscribe to Titan Space TV. That's a great channel. Kalam has got well over 35,000 subscribers, and that's growing all the time. And he covers a wider variety of different views, whereas we're more focused on the critique of Islam. So do share that channel again. So Stops, I'm going to bring you up, and then we will say a final goodbye. So just stick with us for 2 minutes if you don't mind, Kalam. Thank you so much. All right, over to you, Stops.
Okay, there we go. And this is from Bukhari, and it's book 18, number 150. And this is not by Huraira this time, but by Abu Bakr. We were with Allah's apostle. Oh, by the way, is this on full screen? Because I can't see both at the same time.
Sorry, it's very blurred here.
Okay.
I can't really see it that clearly, but just read it sort of somewhat slowly, because it's kind of visible, but not that clear. That's better. That's better. There we go.
All right. So this is by Abu Bakr. We were with Allah's apostle when the sun eclipsed. Allah's apostle stood up, dragging his cloak till he entered the mosque. He led us in a 2 rakat prayer till the sun had cleared. Then the Prophet said, the sun and the moon do not eclipse because of someone's death. So whenever you see these eclipses, pray and invoke Allah until the eclipse is over.
So there we go. Another message of wisdom potentially there about the natural world from somebody that didn't seem to know much about the natural world. So interesting. So thank you very much, Stops. Thanks, TJ, for joining for the short time. I know you didn't get to say much, but we can't keep Kalam forever. Kalam, again, thank you so much to you for coming on, joining the show. Hopefully we can do it again at some point, but it's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much.
Definitely. Thank you for having me.
Thumbs up again.
Yes, thumbs up on that. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody. If you want to join an after show, I'm going to let this run. I will give Anza the link for afterwards. I'm not going to post it in the main chat. And if people want to come and join and have a chat, that's fine. Kalam and some of the other guests may not still be on here, but we can continue the chat afterwards. So good night, and thank you to everybody.
Good night. Thank you, Kalam, very much.